Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into the chilly, soapy shadows of the past to ask one very specific and slightly uncomfortable question. How did Victorian women clean themselves? Picture this. Your window rattles with a damp London wind, your feet ache from yesterday's boots, and a heavy quilt presses down on your chest. Outside, the streets smell like horse sweat and chimney soot. Inside, you're surrounded by a small mountain of lace, wool, and moral expectations. And somewhere, underneath it all, you are very much in need of a wash. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post where you're listening from and what time it is. Are you a midnight history goblin or a lunchtime curiosity fiend? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's early morning. You stir beneath a thick woolen blanket, your breath visible in the pale winter light. The fire's out. Of course it is. No one kept it stoked through the night. You inch a hand out from the covers, instantly regretting it. The air is sharp. Your chamber pot glints in the corner like some cruel joke. A maid clatters in without knocking. She's holding a ceramic basin and a pitcher of water. You pray it's warm. It is not. You sit up in your narrow bed and begin the dreaded morning routine. Your wash stand, a wooden cabinet with a bowl on top, awaits. There's a small mirror cracked slightly at the corner judging you. You pour the icy water into the basin. It sloshes like a dare. You dip the rag in and wring it out with trembling fingers. This is your face wash. No fancy cleanser, no exfoliating scrub, just water. Cold, barely clean, questionably fetched water. Soap? Maybe. Maybe not. If you're well-to-do, you have access to a nice bar of milled soap imported from France or handmade at home from animal fat and lye. If you're middle class, it's probably a sliver of something scented and barely sudsy. If you're poor, soap is a luxury you use for laundry, not skin. You wipe your face briskly, trying not to scream. It's like splashing your cheeks with the Thames in February. Now to dry off, your towel is stiff. Not because it's new, but because it was hand-washed, line-dried, and not exactly fluffed up in a dryer with fabric softener. It smells faintly of iron and wind. This is Victorian morning hygiene. Quick, bracing, and as emotionally comforting as licking a brick. Your hands are washed next, then the neck, behind the ears, always behind the ears. There's a near religious obsession with the area behind the ears, likely because it's one of the few places you can inspect yourself, and where dirt likes to settle. The rest? Forget it. You're not getting naked in this drafty room for a full sponge bath. Not unless it's Sunday. And even then, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You reach for your hairbrush. It's made of boar bristles and real wood. Elegant, maybe engraved. Your hair, depending on your station, might be waist length and coiled into braids, buns, or thick chignons. Today, you're not washing it because today is Tuesday, and that means you washed it last Tuesday. Or was it the Tuesday before? Historians still argue whether most Victorian women wash their hair weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. What they do agree on is that daily washing was rare, and shampoo, when it existed, was often made at home from eggs, vinegar, or grated soap flakes. Rinsed with rainwater if you're lucky. Otherwise, hard water that leaves your scalp itchy and your hair like straw. But we'll get to hair later. First, you tie yours back tightly. The idea of cleanliness often overlaps with tidiness. Clean is pulled back, pinned, respectable. You pull on your underclothes, layers and layers of them. A chemise first, maybe bloomers or drawers, then a corset, tightened with help, unless you're skilled or just dangerously determined. Then the petticoats, maybe 3, possibly 5. You haven't even gotten to your outer dress yet, and you're already sweating. No matter. The Victorian solution to sweat isn't less clothing. It's being less human. You don't sweat. You glow. Unless you're lower class, in which case you just stink by default according to polite society. The windows are fogging up now. Outside, someone's whistling as a cart rattles by. The city wakes slowly, but you need to hurry. Morning tea must be served, errands must be done, and your dress must not hint that you have a functioning digestive system or ever considered a full bath. It's strange, isn't it? How much energy goes into maintaining the illusion of effortless purity. How washing your hands with icy water becomes a symbol of moral virtue. Cleanliness is next to godliness, they say. Except most godly women are shivering, chapped, and secretly praying for hot plumbing. Your maid, bless her, comes back with fresh stockings. She's already washed herself, quickly, at a tap in the scullery with soap made from leftover grease. Her hands are red and raw. No moisturizer, no break. She'll have to boil laundry later, scrub the copper pans, and if she's lucky, get 3 hours to herself after dark. You wonder briefly if she smells better than you, and you wonder even more briefly if it matters. Victorian society is oddly obsessed with odor, especially the absence of it. Smelling clean doesn't mean unscented. It means rose water, lavender sachets, and carbolic soap. You might dab cologne behind your ears or spritz your handkerchief and wave it like a perfume flag wherever you go. Not to hide body odor. No, that's unmentionable. But to show refinement, to perform cleanliness. Back at your mirror, you examine your face. There's a spot forming. Oh no, a single blemish is enough to trigger whispers. Maybe she's unwell. Could be poor hygiene. Has she been wandering about in the fog? The judgment is swift, but the solutions are medieval. You might try lemon juice, or vinegar, or just covering it with powder, chalky, dry, and a bit lead-infused. But let's not spoil the makeup drawer just yet. You lace up your boots. They're stiff leather, polished to a shine. But they've never met the concept of arch support. Your feet go numb on cobblestones. But at least they're dry, unlike your armpits. We'll deal with those in another section. For now, you're clean enough to pass, which, in the Victorian world, is everything. It's not about feeling fresh. It's not about comfort. It's about passing, appearing, convincing the world and yourself that despite the soot, the sweat, the 5 layers of wool, and the frigid air that makes your joints ache like you're 90, you are clean. You stand. You pull your gloves on. You open the door to the hallway, where footsteps echo, and someone somewhere is coughing that all too familiar consumptive cough. But that's their business. You, today, are clean, or something like it. You close the bedroom door behind you, the latch clicking with finality, and immediately feel the weight of your attire pulling down on your shoulders. It's not just psychological, it's literal. Layered fabrics pinch, cinch, and swaddle your body. in what seems less like fashion and more like fortification. And now, if you truly want to freshen up, you've got a major quest ahead of you. Getting out of all this, undressing, isn't something you do casually. In the Victorian era, getting naked is a production that borders on performance, one often requiring assistance, moral restraint, and about 15 minutes of solid determination. Each garment is a riddle, a puzzle box of buttons, clasps, hooks, ribbons, and stays, and every single one has its own purpose, often relating more to social expectations than function. You begin with the gloves. They're delicate, ivory-colored, and somehow always seem to go on smoother than they come off. Then comes the shawl, a fringed affair that kept the morning chill at bay, but now just itches slightly against your neck. Now the real battle begins. You retreat back into your bedroom. Let's assume you've cleared your schedule and bribed your housemaid not to knock for a bit. Removing the outer dress requires reaching behind your own back to unfasten the bodice, an acrobatic move that would qualify you for a medal in any modern yoga class. If you're lucky, there's a back hook, not a full row of tiny fabric-covered buttons, which are the stuff of gothic nightmares and impatient husbands. Once the dress falls away, you're not even close to done. Next come the petticoats. One by one, you tug them down, layers of stiff cotton starched within an inch of their lives. Some are decorative, others are practical. One has a secret pocket sewn in. Another is meant purely to keep the shape of your dress looking less like woman and more like domestic bell tower. Then there's the corset. Ah, yes, the corset. It doesn't come off easily nor quickly. This isn't some costume drama moment where you rip a string and everything gracefully pops open. No, Victorian corsets are structured like armor. They are boned with whale baleen or steel. They are laced so tightly that removing one solo requires not only mirror access, but an alarming threshold for frustration. You tug the laces, loosen the knots. Feel your ribs begin to expand again, slowly, rebelliously. Once unlatched, it doesn't fall off. It clings. It needs to be peeled like old wallpaper. Finally, you're in your chemise, a simple white underlayer that most women wear against their skin to protect their dresses from sweat and body oils. Because remember, you don't wash your clothes every day. You barely wash them weekly. So the chemise acts as a buffer zone. It's thin, usually cotton or linen, and about as exciting as boiled oats. And now, the moment of truth. You are nearly naked. In Victorian terms, this is scandalous. Even if you're alone, even if you're married, even if you're just trying to clean yourself without accidentally asphyxiating from your own perfume. To be without one's stays, aka not wearing a corset, is practically synonymous with being emotionally or morally unstable. You can practically hear your mother's voice now. A lady must always keep her figure upright and her heart pure. Apparently, both of those live somewhere beneath the fourth rib. You move cautiously toward the washstand again. This time, you're thinking full sponge bath, or as full as your drafty room will allow. You heat water near the fire or call for fresh warm water from the kitchen if you're lucky. Most women don't have bathrooms. Some aristocrats do. Lavish marble rooms with copper tubs and porcelain sinks. But even then, the plumbing is temperamental. So you sponge, arms first. Quick swipes with a damp cloth. Then your chest, gently, always gently. Your abdomen, your thighs, your back. Well, as far as your back will allow you to reach. There's no body wash, no loofah, maybe a washcloth or a sponge, maybe even a bit of carbolic soap if you're feeling bold and want your skin to smell like a medical ward. The average soap has no moisturizer. It strips your skin, leaves it tight. It's one step above dish soap and one step below a chemical peel. And remember, there's no central heating. You're naked in a room that could double as a meat locker. The walls breathe cold. The windows sweat. Every drop of water is a punishment, and every rinse is a dare. Still, you persevere. You reach for your toilet water, which isn't what it sounds like. No sewage involved. It's a diluted perfume. Floral, citrus, herbal, used to freshen the body between full baths. You dab it at your wrists, your neck, under your arms. You might use vinegar instead, or lavender water, or even diluted gin in a pinch. Not to sterilize, just to mask. Fragrance is armor. A puff of iris on a handkerchief might spare you from the stench of the street. A spritz of rose water might help you forget you haven't bathed in 6 days. And you're not alone. Upper-class women often have dressing rooms, small sanctuaries where a lady's maid helps them navigate this whole routine. The maid, of course, does the same thing later, alone, in a cramped servant's quarters with a cracked bowl and a bit of leftover soap. Historians still argue whether most Victorian women felt ashamed of their bodies or simply disconnected from them. Hygiene wasn't talked about in open terms. There were no TikToks explaining armpit detox or skincare routines. There was just a vague sense that a woman ought to be fresh, dainty, and as odorless as a lace doily, without ever being seen to try. Once washed and perfumed, you dry quickly, no fluffy towels, just a piece of linen, maybe warmed near the hearth. Then comes redressing, which is, well, let's just say it's like playing dress-up in reverse. You hoist your chemise, cinch the corset back into place, breathing deeply first because once it's tight, deep breaths are not on the menu. Then the petticoats, then the dress. You begin to rebuild the architecture. This isn't just clothing. It's a performance of hygiene. Every layer that touches your clean-ish skin must now be protected, reshaped, and adjusted. You look in the mirror again. Your cheeks are pink from scrubbing and cold. Your fingers are wrinkled, but you look presentable. Of course, none of this prepares you for what happens when you can't undress. Sometimes you need to freshen up on the go. That's where handkerchiefs come in, embroidered, monogrammed, lightly perfumed. You carry one at all times, and it is your first line of defense against street smells, sweat, and stray sniffles. There's also the traveling hygiene set, small portable kits with combs, mini perfume vials, perhaps a tin of tooth powder. Think Victorian Glossier, but make it wrought iron. You tuck yours into your handbag. You don't feel clean exactly, but you feel composed. And in the Victorian world, that's what really counts. Because in this era, cleanliness is as much about seeming as it is about being. No one expects you to be fresh as a daisy, but heaven help you if you fail to appear that way. And so, with every hook refastened, every ribbon retied, and your neck dabbed with just a bit more lavender water, you are ready. Ready to greet a world that assumes you float above dirt, grime, and sweat. A world where purity is performative and nudity is reserved for medical emergencies or Greek statues. A world where your maid knows exactly how long it took you to get dressed, and yet somehow you'll both pretend it was effortless. You exit your room again, for real this time. You pass the same hallway mirror. You glance at yourself. Briefly, you look clean, and that will have to be enough. Your boots thump softly against the carpeted stairs as you descend, your freshly dabbed rosewater scent trailing behind like a polite ghost. Today's plans include a short outing, and you've already calculated the number of hours you'll need to hold yourself together before the corset's grip turns from fashionable firmness to full-blown ribcage protest. But there's one thing you won't be doing before you head out: washing your hair. Because in Victorian England, washing your hair is not a daily task. It's not even weekly for most. No quick hop into a steamy shower, no shampoo bottle with cheerful citrus claims. No, washing your hair is an event, one requiring time, planning, and preferably a small army of patient assistants. If you're middle or upper class, you probably have a dressing table stocked with the essentials: a comb carved from ivory or tortoiseshell, a thick bristled brush, a bottle of oil or tonic with dubious ingredients, and maybe, just maybe, a jar of homemade dry shampoo that's mostly starch and good intentions. You sit before your mirror now, hands resting in your lap, knowing what's about to happen. It's hair day. Let's begin with the basic truth. Your hair is long. Not shoulder length, not bobbed. Long. Waist length, maybe longer. Victorian women prize length as a sign of femininity, health, and discipline. To cut your hair short is scandalous unless you're ill or grieving, or worse, trying to look like a French actress. So first, the brushing. You tilt your head forward and begin at the ends, working your way up gently. 100 strokes per day is the rule, or at least the cliché, though historians still argue whether this was truly common or just aspirational advice passed down by fashion magazines and fussy aunts. Either way, your arms are tired halfway through, and your hair still feels slightly dusty. That dust, it's not metaphorical. You live in a world filled with coal smoke, horsehair upholstery, unpaved streets, and constant fires. Your hair is a sponge for the city's filth. It traps the air itself, and over time begins to feel more like a helmet than a crown. You consider your options. First, the dry cleanse. You could sprinkle your scalp with starch or talc or finely sifted flour. Rub it in, wait, and brush it out. This method is fast-ish, effective-ish, and leaves your hair feeling like powdered pastry. But sometimes it buys you a few days of freshness, or at least a good enough illusion. Second, hair tonics. These bottles promise everything from shine to strength to eternal youth. Most smell like gin, cloves, or an overenthusiastic pharmacy. Some contain alcohol, ammonia, or egg whites. Others are made with bear grease, rosemary, and rose petals. One particularly curious recipe includes onion juice, which makes your hair very shiny, but guarantees you won't be invited to tea anytime soon. Then, of course, there's the full wash. You steel yourself. This is not a casual bath in the hair combo. You need water, lots of it, preferably heated. You'll need basins, plural, and either a friend or a very patient maid. You sit near the fire. A towel is wrapped around your shoulders, and your hair is sectioned with pins. Your assistant, maybe your sister, maybe a domestic servant, pours warm water gently over your scalp from a pitcher, catching the runoff in a basin. You lean forward awkwardly, feeling like a large pet being prepped for a dog show. Now for the cleanser. Shampoo, as we know it today, doesn't exist yet. The term shampoo originally comes from the Hindi word champo, and it only enters English vocabulary thanks to colonial contact with India. But in Victorian England, shampoo is usually homemade, often a mix of shaved soap dissolved in hot water or a blend of egg yolks and lemon juice. Some women use beer, others swear by vinegar. One particularly brave soul in your circle claims she washes her hair with rainwater steeped in birch bark. You choose soap and egg yolk, hoping to avoid both the scent of salad and the sting of vinegar in your eyes. Your maid rubs the concoction gently into your scalp. It foams a little, enough to make you feel slightly luxurious. And then comes the long, slow rinse. Multiple pitchers, arms sore from holding still, cold water to finish because you ran out of warm. Your hair now hangs wet and heavy down your back. You won't be styling it any time soon. You won't even be leaving the house. This is a stay home and dry slowly kind of day. You wrap it in linen towels and wait, and wait, and wait, because even with a fire blazing, Victorian homes are not warm by modern standards. Insulation is a myth. You feel the cold settling back in through the floorboards, up your toes, into your spine. Your scalp tightens. Your nose runs. You consider crying, but remember that tears just make you colder. By evening, your hair is half dry, fluffy, and enormous. You might braid it loosely for bed or leave it down to finish drying. Either way, the ordeal is nearly over. You'll go another week without repeating this, maybe 2. Some women stretch it to a month. After all, most social interactions are polite, fleeting, and heavily perfumed. And the elaborate hairstyles of the era, braids, twists, buns, and coils, are built to last. You won't be taking it down again until you absolutely have to. And here's a quirky fact you can chew on. Some women, especially actresses or courtesans, were known to wash their hair more often. Why? Because they were seen more often on stage, in social circles, in intimate company. Clean hair became a kind of status marker in reverse. If your hair had to be washed often, you were living a very active, very visible life. Perhaps too visible. Perhaps improper. It's ironic, really. You'd think cleanliness would be a virtue across all walks of life. But in Victorian society, it's always tangled in judgment. Washing too much? You're vain? Washing too little? You're uncouth. Washing with help? You're privileged. Washing alone? You're suspicious. Even your hairbrush carries hidden meanings. For upper-class women, brushes are heirlooms, passed down, engraved, softened with use. But if a maid is caught using her mistress's brush, fired instantly, because cleanliness, like so many things in this era, is not just physical, it's hierarchical. You finally braid your hair, one long plait down your back, tied with ribbon. You feel the clean scalp tingles, the slight tug of tight strands. You sniff, cautiously. It's a bit eggy, but definitely better than before. You crawl into bed. Your head rests on a pillowcase washed 3 weeks ago. Air dried in the wind, pressed flat with irons. It smells like sunlight and chimney soot. You smile, exhausted. Your hair is clean. And if you ration that out carefully, maybe it can stay that way until next Tuesday. You wake the next morning with your braids slightly frizzed and a pillow crease etched into your cheek like an old map. The fire has died again, of course, and the air is sharp enough to cut. You curl your feet under the blanket for a moment longer, just listening. The muffled clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the low hum of a coal cart outside, the creak of someone walking overhead. Life is moving, and so must you, except your armpits are damp, and your chemise is sticking to your back like a clingy ghost. Let's talk about deodorant. Or rather, let's talk about how you deal with sweat in a world that pretends sweat doesn't exist. Because here's the thing, you're always sweating. Whether you're squeezed into a wool dress in August or shivering in a corset in December, your body still does what bodies do. But the Victorian ideal woman, she doesn't glisten, she doesn't stink, and she certainly doesn't reapply anything in public. She simply doesn't smell, which means your actual body. Kind of a problem. You sit up and reach for your toilet tray. There's no roll-on, no spray, no fancy natural stick with sage and bergamot. There is, however, alum, a mineral salt crystal that some women rub directly onto the skin to reduce odor and sweat. You hold a chunk of it now, cool, translucent, vaguely resembling a decorative paperweight, and press it under your arms. It stings, just a bit, especially if you've shaved recently, which, spoiler alert, you probably haven't. In fact, body hair isn't the enemy yet. It exists quietly. Women may pluck the brows or tweeze a stray chin hair, but shaving underarms? Not a thing. Not widely, not yet. Hair is ignored, or hidden, or, for the upper crust, dealt with by pumice stone or sugaring paste, but that's a topic for later. For now, you powder. Underarms, chest, back, anywhere you think might start to feel damp. Your powder smells faintly floral, or maybe just chalky. It's made from starch, crushed rice, or talc, mixed with a few drops of rose or lavender oil. You pat it on with a puff and try not to breathe in the dust cloud you've just created. Now, you grab your toilet vinegar. Again, nothing to do with toilets as we know them. This is a fragrant, acidic concoction meant to cleanse and freshen. Your bottle contains vinegar steeped in herbs, rosemary, thyme, lavender. Some are even spiked with camphor or alum for that extra tingle. You dip a cloth into it and dab along your collarbones, under your arms, the backs of your knees. The sting? Sharp. The smell? Medicinal, but clean. And here's a quirky detail. Some women would sew small linen pads into the underarms of their dresses, removable sweat shields, if you will. They'd be washed more often than the dress itself, and were sometimes soaked in vinegar or scented oils. Practical, reusable, environmentally friendly, and extremely, extremely necessary. Because your dress, it's not getting washed today or tomorrow. Maybe not this month. We'll cover that later. You reach for your perfume, not something you spritz all over. This is a precise application. You touch it to your pulse points, behind the ears, at the wrists, maybe just beneath your chin. It's not just about scent. It's about control, disguise, domestication. You step into your petticoats, then your corset, then your outer dress, layers upon layers, and already you can feel the warmth rising. Not in a cozy way, in a trap-the-heat way. Your armpits start again almost immediately. It's a losing game. But the rules of the game are strict. Because if you smell bad, it isn't just embarrassing, it's moral failure, poor hygiene, poor breeding, poor control. Cleanliness is tied to character. People don't say, she sweats a lot. They say, she's unrefined. You glance at your maid, as she rushes by with a stack of laundry. Her face glistens, her neck is damp, but she doesn't stop to fix it. She can't. Servants are expected to be clean, but invisible. No time to freshen up, no privacy, no luxury of rose water. A splash of cold water in the scullery basin is all they get. Maybe a sniff of the mistress's soap when she's not looking. You at least have options. One of them is, or was, chalk. Yes, regular chalk. Some women would grind it up and dab it onto the skin like a primitive powder. It absorbs moisture, sure. It also leaves white marks all over your dark sleeves. Not ideal. Another strange solution? Baking soda. Forward-thinking women, or those with chemist husbands, might mix baking soda with starch or even lard to create a sort of underarm paste. Effective? Somewhat. Comfortable? Absolutely not. Smelling faintly of biscuits? Likely. But here's the real kicker. Sweat itself wasn't always considered the villain. It was the smell. That's where the Victorian obsession with scent really ramps up. You carry a handkerchief doused in cologne. You keep scented sachets in your drawers. You might even wear a tiny pomander, an ornate charm filled with herbs or perfume, around your neck or wrist, like a fashionable gas mask. Because let's not forget, the streets stink. Badly. Horse manure, coal smoke, stagnant water, unwashed bodies, and the occasional dead cat in the gutter. Compared to that, a little underarm odor is a minor offense. Still, you adapt. You sit for tea. Posture perfect, chin lifted, not a bead of sweat in sight. What no one sees is the linen shield slowly soaking beneath your sleeve. What no one comments on is the faint vinegar scent curling beneath your perfume. What no one admits is that they, too, are sweating. Constantly, silently, strategically. Historians still argue whether most Victorian women were genuinely unaware of body odor or just incredibly good at pretending it didn't exist. Some letters and diaries mention personal fragrance or discomfort, but the language is coded, the references vague. What we do know is that nobody talks about armpits in polite society. You just deal with it, quietly, elegantly, desperately. You head out for your errands. The sun has risen, but the fog still clings to the corners of buildings. You pass a butcher, a flower girl, a man selling eels from a barrel. The air is thick with competing smells. You walk faster, not because you're late, but because moving quickly lets the cold breeze up your skirts and under your bodice. Brief relief. Your gloved hands adjust your shawl. Your cheeks are flushed, but your underarms steady, powdered, mostly under control. You return home, peel off the gloves, the shawl, the hat. You lean close to the mirror, lift your arm, and yes, you're still acceptable. You survived another day, not without sweating, not without stinking, but without appearing to. And in the Victorian world, that's what hygiene is really about. Not being clean, but looking like you are. You slide your shawl from your shoulders and feel a soft puff of dust escape from the fringe like your clothing is sighing in relief. You're back indoors now, safe from the muddled perfumes of the city, from chimney smoke and horse dung and the ever-present human funk of too many bodies in too little space. But even within your home's protective walls, there's a ritual left unfinished, one that requires heat, patience, coordination, and a rather spectacular tolerance for damp discomfort. That's right, it's bath time. Now, don't misunderstand. This isn't a light some candles and throw in a bath bomb affair. A Victorian bath is not a moment of zen. It's a production, one that often feels like a punishment with good intentions. First of all, there's no built-in plumbing unless you're very wealthy. No faucets to twist. No hot water on demand. Instead, hot water must be boiled on the kitchen stove and hauled upstairs in heavy kettles. Multiple kettles, over and over, unless you're in the rare and aristocratic minority with a bathroom. You're bathing in a tin or copper tub that lives in your bedroom or the scullery, tucked in a corner like a guilty secret. And here it is now, oval-shaped, faintly dented, probably inherited. You watch as the maid struggles with the first steaming kettle, her hands red and calloused from the stove. She pours slowly, steam curling toward the ceiling. The water level rises painfully slowly. You try not to think about how much has to spill before it's bathable. Eventually, after about 6 kettles and some negotiation, you're ready, sort of. You begin undressing again, slowly, methodically, because once you're in the bath, you'll be in it. There's no slipping out quickly for a forgotten towel or a new bar of soap. No multitasking, no just rinse my hair. This is a single-purpose soak. You strip down to your chemise. Some women bathe in it, preserving modesty even in solitude. Others remove it, daring the full exposure of cold air and lukewarm water. You decide to go bold. You dip a toe into the bath and immediately reconsider your life choices. It's never quite the right temperature. It's either scalding near the surface and ice underneath, or it's already going tepid and you've only just sat down. The tub is narrow, shallow, and rarely comfortable. Your knees are bent, your back aches, your behind is aware. But you're in, you've committed, and so the process begins. There is soap, but don't expect anything creamy or luxurious. Most Victorian soap is brown, lumpy, and smells like whatever fat it was rendered from. The popular carbolic soap, introduced in the 1860s, has antiseptic properties and a stench that suggests you've just scrubbed in for surgery. There's also Castile soap, if you're fancy, made from olive oil and imported from Spain. It's smoother, but still basic by modern standards. You lather what you can. Arms, chest, legs, underarms, back, awkwardly. You pour a bit of water over yourself with a bowl or your cupped hands. Splash, wipe, breathe. And now comes the part no one wants to talk about. The undercarriage. There's no special cleanser for intimate hygiene. No pH-balanced anything. If you're lucky, you have vinegar or borax water, both of which sting and smell faintly like a haunted apothecary. Most women simply use soap, and not very much of it, because here's the silent understanding. You're not really expected to be squeaky clean, just not offensively unclean. You reach for a washcloth, often called a flannel, and dab carefully. You keep your legs folded like secrets. Everything is tentative, polite, perfunctory. The idea of really scrubbing is almost too bold. You're not washing to feel refreshed. You're washing to reset the social timer. You can now say you've bathed this week or this month, and that means you're still respectable. Historians still argue whether most women bathed weekly, bi-weekly, or only for special occasions. Diaries and letters mention taking a full bath in vague, euphemistic terms. I refreshed myself in the water. I took my airing and my ablutions. I was assisted with my toilette. The reality? Unless you were wealthy and obsessed with cleanliness, bathing was infrequent. It wasn't that women didn't want to be clean. It's just that everything worked against them. Logistics, modesty, cold, time, and fashion. Back in your tub, the water is turning gray. You try not to think about it. Soap residue, dust, powder, a bit of sweat. That's normal. That's fine, right? You rinse with the last kettle of water, lukewarm by now. You wish you had a sponge. You wish you had conditioner. You wish you had privacy. Because while this is your bath, the entire household knows it's happening. The maid might walk in, a sister might yell through the door. There's no lock, no real me time. Just one slippery chance to scrape off a few layers of society's grime before drying off and starting the dressing game all over again. You step out carefully, clutching a towel. The floor is cold. The towel is thin. Your skin prickles with goosebumps. You dry off briskly, avoiding the cracked mirror that sees too much. And then into fresh underclothes, a clean chemise, new stockings, maybe a fresh corset liner if you're feeling indulgent. You sit by the fire for a moment, toes extended, arms wrapped around your knees. You don't feel beautiful, but you feel acceptable. And in the Victorian world, that's a luxury. Some women never bathed fully at home. Instead, they relied on public baths, which we'll visit soon. But for now, your personal ritual is complete. You dump the tub water into a slop pail or out the window, if you're very rural and very unsupervised. The maid will clean up the rest, or maybe you will. Depends on who you are. You dab your wrists with lavender water, comb your hair, powder your nose. You've survived the bath. It wasn't fun, but it was necessary. And in this era, survival and soap rarely come hand in hand. The bath has come and gone, and now your skin is pink. Your hair is wrapped up in a towel turban that will probably stay damp until dinner, and your toes are just beginning to tingle back to life. You're sitting by the fire now, wrapped in a shawl, staring into the flames, relishing the rare warmth. But don't get too comfortable, because the tub was the easy part. The real challenge is what happens when your bath isn't at home, because sometimes home isn't an option. Sometimes the stove is broken. The water delivery was late. Your maid is ill. Or, let's be honest, you just don't have the resources, space, or patience to heat 6 kettles of water and drag a tub out from behind a cabinet. And so, you head to the next best thing, the public bathhouse. Now, before you get ideas of scented candles and spa music, let's adjust your expectations. A Victorian public bath is not a place of luxury. It's a place of utility. And it's where you go when you're out of options, or just out of soap. You step into your boots and wrap your scarf tightly around your face. The fog outside is thick and yellowish, tinted by coal smoke. Your skirt brushes against other pedestrians as you walk, the sound of carriage wheels and clopping hooves mixing with street cries. Hot eels! Fresh pies! Warm your bones! Finally, the bathhouse looms ahead. Brick, plain, vaguely municipal. A line of women waits outside, baskets on their arms. Some have towels. Others carry a bar of soap wrapped in cloth. One holds her child's hand, gripping it like a lifeline. Inside, the air is warmer but moist. It smells of iron, mildew, and something sharp you can't place. The clerk behind the desk asks how long you want. You pay a small fee, affordable, but still a cost. Cleanliness as ever. is a privilege. You're handed a key and directed to a cubicle. It's not a private suite. It's not even a room. It's a partition, wooden, damp, with a curtain that doesn't quite reach the floor. The tub is already filled with hot water. How hot? That depends on who used it last. Because yes, sometimes the water is reused. In cheaper bathhouses, the water is drained and partially replaced, but not between every single customer. If you're lucky, you're early in the day. If not, well, you'll do your best not to splash. You undress quickly, stuffing your clothes into a wicker basket. Your boots squeak on the wet floor. You eye the walls, peeling paint, mildew, and the odd spider. You try not to think about what's touched the surface before you. You slip into the tub. It's deeper than the one at home. That's something. You submerge slowly, cautiously, holding your breath, as if the water might bite. And honestly, it kind of does. It's hot, uncomfortably so. But that's a good thing. Hot enough to feel like it's doing something. Like maybe it can melt off the week of coal dust, perspiration, and corset residue clinging to your skin. You reach for your soap. It's rough and gritty, homemade perhaps, or borrowed. You scrub with a cloth, moving methodically, arms, neck, underarms, torso. You skip your legs for now. You just don't want to dunk your knees below the questionable waterline. Other women bathe around you, separated by thin curtains. You hear the splash of elbows, the quiet sigh of someone easing into the tub, a cough that sounds too deep for comfort. You wonder who sat here before you. You wonder what they left behind. A strange intimacy settles in the air. Not friendliness, just shared purpose. A wordless agreement. We're here to be clean, and we won't ask too many questions. Now, if you're in a nicer bathhouse, perhaps a Turkish bath or one of the newer, fashionable establishments, you'll be offered more. A steam room, a hot plunge pool, maybe even an attendant to scrub your back with soap and a coarse mitt. This sounds luxurious. It is, until you realize the mitt has been used on everyone today, probably without washing. Still, the experience is oddly invigorating. Your pores open, your muscles relax, your skin tingles. For a brief moment, you feel something close to radiant. And here's a quirky fact. Some Turkish baths even offer hair washing services. Yes, in public. You lean your head back while an attendant pours water over you, scrubs your scalp with soap and herbs, and wrings your hair out like laundry. This, of course, assumes you're comfortable being handled like a damp sheep in full view of strangers. Some women adore it. Others are horrified. Historians still argue whether these bathhouses represented liberation for women's hygiene or just another arena where class and modesty collided awkwardly. You don't get your hair washed today. Too public, too risky. You got a reputation to maintain, and your family doesn't need whispers about that girl who let strange women touch her curls. You rinse quickly. One final pour of water over your shoulders, cold, bracing, awful. You step out, dripping. The floor is wet. Your towel is thin. There's no heat in the room, and your teeth begin to chatter. You dress quickly, wiggling damp limbs into dry layers, hoping you don't trap moisture where it will fester later. You smooth your skirt, pull on your boots, and pin your hat carefully. Outside, people pass you without a glance. You look the same, but you feel different. There's something empowering about reclaiming your own scent, even briefly, about scrubbing off the assumptions that cling like soot to your hem. about stepping into the fog not as an ideal, but as a real, clean-skinned woman who just braved a public bath and came out the other side mostly unscathed. You return home. You smell faintly of coal soap and eucalyptus, not perfume, not rose water, but clean. That will do. You've survived the public bath, dodged suspicious tub rings, reassembled your dignity, and come out vaguely eucalyptus-scented. But don't relax just yet. Being clean in the Victorian era isn't just about the occasional bath. It's about maintaining that cleanliness in the days, sometimes weeks, between your soaks. Enter the daily ablution ritual. Because here's the truth. You're not bathing every day. That's just not feasible. There's no plumbing in most homes, and heating water is an exhausting process. But your body doesn't stop sweating, and society certainly doesn't stop judging, so you develop a system, a routine, a method of staying presentable, deodorized, and socially acceptable, one basin at a time. You begin in the morning, shivering slightly in your cotton chemise. The fireplace hasn't been lit yet. The window pane is sweating with condensation. You approach the washstand like it's an altar, and in many ways, it is. There sits your porcelain basin, half filled with cold water, and beside it, a jug of water that was maybe warmed an hour ago and is now lukewarm at best. You mix them carefully, creating a temperature that won't give you frostbite, but also won't lull you back to sleep. There's a bar of soap nearby, not for your whole body, just for your hands and maybe your face. A washcloth called a flannel is waiting too. It's already damp from yesterday. You pretend not to notice. You dip it in the basin, wring it out, and begin with your face, eyes, cheeks, forehead. The soap stings a little if it gets too close to your eyes, but it leaves your skin taut, tingling, and stripped of the night's oil and coal dust. Then underarms, one at a time, followed by a rather delicate attempt at your neck, behind your ears, and anywhere else that might carry a faint whiff of human. Your undercarriage? If you're brave, yes, but only with water. The idea of soaping that region daily is considered aggressive. Doctors of the time are still debating how much is too much. One camp insists that a simple rinse with clean water will preserve feminine health, while another argues that daily vinegar washes are essential for purity. Historians still argue whether these strict hygiene taboos were rooted more in medical theory or in the ongoing obsession with female chastity. You wring out the flannel and give it one last swipe down your legs. That'll do. Now it's time to dry off with the ever-present hand towel, the one that has to last the whole week. You pat your skin, taking care not to rub too hard. Victorian towels aren't plush. They're often coarse linen, thin and scratchy, like something you might use to strain soup. With your skin still damp, you reach for a powder puff. Yes, powder. Not just for the face. The fashionable and hygienic woman dusts her underarms, her chest, even the backs of her knees with perfumed talc. It soaks up moisture, prevents chafing under those layers of petticoats, and masks anything suspicious. Today's scent is lavender. Yesterday's was rose. Tomorrow might be orris root if you can find it. Some powders are homemade, others store-bought, and all of them promise one thing: a hint of floral calm layered over the musk of existence. Now to your hair. It's still wrapped in the towel from yesterday's wash. You undo it slowly, letting your damp strands fall over your shoulders. Victorian women don't wash their hair daily or weekly. Some only wash it once every few weeks, sometimes less. Why? Because drying it takes forever. There are no hair dryers, and the process is tedious at best. Instead, you brush 100 strokes. That's the rule, not just a saying, actual advice from beauty manuals of the time. You pick up your boar bristle brush and begin. Long, patient passes from root to tip, gently pulling out dust, oils, stray hairs, and maybe a rogue spider, if you're unlucky. And here's the science. Brushing distributes the natural oils of your scalp down the shaft of your hair, keeping it shiny and healthy without washing. Or at least that's the theory. In practice, your arms get tired by stroke 65. You section your hair, you braid it loosely or twist it into a chignon. You pin it with care, knowing it must last all day. A hat will go over it soon. That will flatten everything. That's life. Then it's on to teeth. Yes, you brush your teeth, but not with what you'd recognize today. The Victorian woman uses a dry toothbrush, or one dipped in salt or bicarbonate of soda. Tooth powders are also popular. Chalky, sometimes minty, often gritty. Some contain charcoal, some burnt bread. A fringe recipe suggests powdered cuttlefish bone. You grit your teeth, quite literally, and scrub. Not too hard, though. You've heard rumors that overbrushing can make your teeth fall out. You decide 1 minute is plenty. You rinse with water, no mouthwash. But you might chew on parsley or cloves afterward for freshness. Breath is important. Always. Finally, you finish with your hands. Always your hands. You scrub them gently with soap, rinse and dry. Then apply a bit of hand cream, perhaps rose-scented, perhaps something homemade with beeswax. Your hands are your calling card. Cracked, dirty hands suggest a servant. Soft, clean hands tell the world that you are, at least for today, in control of your own narrative. And now, you're ready to dress. But as you fasten your corset and smooth your skirt, you feel it. The slow creep of sweat at your back, the faint itch where powder has settled, the start of a day that will tug and twist and stain and wrinkle everything you've just cleaned. Still, you face the day. You do your best. And tomorrow, the basin will be there again. The flannel, the powder, the brush. It's not glamorous, but it's routine. And in a world as unpredictable as this one, routine is survival. Sometimes it's even a little comforting. The basin has been emptied, your face powdered, your hair brushed to a sheen, your underarms dabbed delicately with lavender talc. You look almost fresh. Almost. But then the smell hits you, not from yourself, though you're acutely aware of the faint dampness under your chemise, but from someone else. Your younger brother, perhaps, sprinting by with wild curls and muddy boots, or your father's waistcoat, which hasn't been washed in a suspicious amount of time. Or worse, the drawing room carpet, which someone spilled cod liver oil on last week, and no amount of lavender sachets has successfully subdued. Welcome to the smellscape of Victorian life. Let's be honest. Even when people bathe, even when they scrub and powder and brush, this is not an odorless age. You live in a world where things smell strongly, constantly. Not always badly, but definitely presently. Start with yourself. You, like most women, are wearing layers. And those layers don't get washed every day. Your chemise, the cotton slip closest to your skin, gets laundered weekly if you're lucky. But the corset, the petticoats, the outer dress, they might go weeks without a proper clean. Wool and silk, after all, can't just be dunked in a wash tub. And soap is expensive. So instead of frequent laundering, you rely on linen barriers, strategic brushing, and the occasional hang-in-the-airing cupboard trick. And, of course, perfume. Perfume isn't just about smelling nice. It's about survival. You dab it on your wrists, your neck, your handkerchief, the lining of your gloves. You might even sprinkle a little on your hairbrush so your locks carry the faint scent of violets or heliotrope. But this isn't modern perfume. It's not carefully balanced and mass-produced. This is perfume mixed in chemist shops, sometimes made at home, often heady, sometimes overwhelmingly floral, and occasionally downright dangerous. Some formulas contain lead or arsenic. Others use animal musk that was, well, let's just say ethically dubious. You might carry a small vinaigrette, a locket with a sponge soaked in vinegar and herbs. When the air gets too foul, and it often does, you lift it to your nose like a dainty gas mask. Because outside, the street is an olfactory war zone. Horse dung, coal smoke, unwashed bodies, rotting vegetables, factory discharge, damp wool, fishmongers' buckets, all of it blends into a pungent cocktail that clings to your clothing and nestles into your hair like a terrible souvenir. You pass someone on the street and catch a whiff of sweat and gin and something else you'd rather not identify. Inside your house, the situation isn't much better. Your chamber pot lives under the bed, and even when emptied, it leaves behind a presence. The fireplace is your only source of warmth, but it belches out soot and ash. If someone has a cold, there's menthol in the air. If someone is sick, there's vinegar in the corners and maybe even tar paper tacked to the walls. It's not exactly a scented candle paradise. To combat this, you employ smell-masking strategies. Pomanders filled with cloves and citrus hang in closets. Bowls of dried flowers and herbs, called potpourri, are placed in strategic corners. You burn pastilles, little scented tablets that smoke gently and claim to purify the air. Sometimes you just open a window and hope for a breeze that doesn't bring more problems. You change your linens more often than your clothes. Bed sheets, especially in summer, absorb a horrifying amount of human essence. You beat them, brush them, and air them in the sun. Where UV rays do the work, your soap can't. And yes, you clean your mouth. You already brush your teeth, but you also chew herbs like parsley, fennel seeds, or cardamom to freshen breath. Some women even swish with vinegar or lemon juice, though that's likely to leave enamel weeping quietly into the night. Now, let's not forget body odor. This is the age before deodorant as we know it. You rely on powders, perfumes, and frequent cloth changes to keep things in check. Some women experiment with lemon juice or alum powder under the arms. Others apply vinegar. A few brave souls try sponging with cologne daily. A bold move that works until you sweat and suddenly smell like pickled roses. And here's a quirky tidbit. There were early deodorant products on the market sold as perspiration preventatives, often in paste or cream form. But they were controversial. Sweating was considered natural, to a point. Blocking it entirely seemed unnatural, possibly unhealthy. And women were expected to sweat even less than men, which was absurd, considering they were also wearing a full 4 pounds of layered fabric in midsummer. Historians still argue whether Victorian society truly believed women didn't sweat, or whether they simply preferred to pretend they didn't. out of some complicated blend of modesty, denial, and olfactory optimism. Back to you. After your morning wash, you do a smell check. Not scientific, just the subtle tilt of your chin, the sniff at your shoulder, the cautious pass of a gloved hand near your sleeve. All clear. For now. But you're not just worried about your scent. You're aware of others, constantly. It's part of the social language. Who smells faintly of lavender? Who reeks of pipe smoke? Who's masking something worse? Odors become a sort of gossip. The maid smells like carbolic soap. Has she been tending the sick? The spinster down the road wears too much patchouli. What is she hiding? And of course, there's class. Cleanliness, or the appearance of it, is a marker of respectability. You've heard whispers about women who use scent too boldly. It's considered vulgar, even suspicious. Too much musk, and suddenly you're being compared to an actress, or worse, a courtesan. So you tread carefully. One drop of perfume on the wrist, one sachet of herbs in the pocket, one spritz of rose water on your brush. But never too much, never enough to say, I'm hiding something. Just enough to say, I'm above it all. Of course, no one truly is. Not in this city, not in this era. Everyone sweats, everyone smells, everyone fights the daily battle of body versus civility. But you've done your part. You've powdered, brushed, dabbed, scrubbed, and aired. You smell like a Victorian woman should. Faintly floral, vaguely herbal, and definitely like you tried. And honestly, that's what matters. You wake before dawn, and you can already hear it. The groan of metal tubs being dragged across floorboards, the distant thump of boots on stairs, the faint whoosh of a kettle being set on the hearth. It's Monday, laundry day, or as you've come to think of it, the most brutal day of the Victorian week. You slide from bed reluctantly, your nightgown already sticking to your back and the humid heat radiating from the kitchen below. A muggy day, worst case scenario. Damp weather means linens won't dry properly, clothes might sour on the line. And you? You're facing a marathon of boiling, scrubbing, wringing, starching, and hanging that would bring a lesser woman to her knees. Laundry day is no small domestic task. It's a full-blown logistical siege. Victorian women do not toss a load in a machine and call it done. You, instead, will spend 12 to 16 hours washing every stitch of clothing your household has sullied over the past week. This includes undergarments, handkerchiefs, aprons, towels, collars, cuffs, bedding, and if you're brave, the occasional outer layer. But be warned, outer garments, like wool coats and silk dresses, rarely go in the tub. They're brushed, spot-cleaned, and aired. Immersing them risks shrinking, bleeding dyes, or ruination. So most of your energy goes into the layers beneath, the bits that actually touch your skin. You start by sorting. Whites to one pile, colors to another, heavily soiled pieces to a third. Corset covers, chemises, bloomers, stockings, and nightgowns all get separated with almost ritual care. Each item's future depends on it. Then the real fun begins. Your first step is heating water, buckets of it. Several kettles worth, poured into copper tubs set over open flames. You inhale the rising steam, the scent of ash and damp linen already creeping into your nostrils. Soap is next. Real soap. Not the creamy, fragrant bars you use on your skin, but coarse, alkaline stuff. Carbolic, lye-based, or made from boiled animal fats. The kind that scours and strips and turns your knuckles raw. You scrape it into the tub, watching it swirl into cloudy, scalding water. In go the linens. You plunge your arms in elbow deep, the heat biting, the fabric twisting between your fingers. You scrub, you beat, you rub items against a washboard, a ridged metal surface that shreds dirt, and, if you're not careful, fabric too, or skin. You feel the sting already. Some stains are stubborn. Ink, sweat, and, yes, blood. For these, you might use a mixture of lemon juice and sunlight, or dab on salt, or soak overnight in buttermilk. No bleach yet. Just chemistry your grandmother taught you and a little prayer to the laundry gods. For especially filthy garments, you boil them, literally. Into a giant copper pot they go, bubbling like laundry stew. The smell is not great. A mix of lye, damp fabric, and whatever mystery gunk has been lingering in collars and cuffs. And then comes rinsing. Tub after tub of fresh water. No indoor plumbing here, so someone is fetching it by the bucket. You slosh, wring, and repeat. Sometimes twice, if you want your whites to stay white and not a charming shade of gray. And now, the part that requires pure brute force wringing. You twist, you squeeze, you call for help if you're lucky enough to have it. Or, if you're wealthy enough to own one, you use a mangle. It's a massive cast iron contraption with rollers you crank by hand. Items go in sodden and emerge flattened, rid of water, and nearly rid of hope. Your arms ache. Your back spasms. Your skirt is soaked to the hem. And there are still 10 more pieces to go. The final act? Drying. You cart everything to the garden or yard, if you're lucky enough to have one. Otherwise, it's the attic or ropes strung above the stove. You hang shirts, drawers, and petticoats with wooden pegs, praying no sudden rain will undo your labor. Or worse, that soot from the neighbor's chimney doesn't settle like confetti across your freshly scrubbed chemises. On a windy day, you watch them dance, ghosts of your daily life, billowing and snapping in the breeze. It's almost beautiful. If your arms weren't threatening mutiny, then it's time for the finishing touches. Many items must be starched. Collars, cuffs, and some petticoats are dipped in a mixture of flour and water to give them stiffness. You leave them to dry again. Once they're ready, you iron. And these aren't electric irons. They're cast iron blocks heated directly on the stove. If you misjudge the temperature, you scorch fabric, or worse, your hand. You test the iron's heat by flicking water on its surface. If it sizzles just so, you press it down on the cloth, smoothing and shaping, sweat dripping from your brow. Now, finally, folding. You stack your hard-won, crisp, starched, lavender-scented linens into neat piles. The sleeves are folded just so. The lace is untangled, the towels are soft and vaguely warm, and then, at last, you rest. Kind of. You still have to make supper, but for a moment you sit with your reddened fingers and your steaming cup of tea and admire the miracle of clean clothes. You've just done what Victorian laundry manuals describe as the most fatiguing of all domestic labor. And those manuals understate everything. Here's a quirky aside. Some Victorian women tried to outsource laundry entirely. Urban centers had professional laundresses, often poor women who took in baskets from wealthier homes. But they charged by the item, and horror stories abounded. Chemises returned with soot stains, lace disintegrating from overboiling, the occasional garment gone missing. So, unless you were very rich or very daring, you handled the job yourself or supervised the poor maid who did. Historians still argue whether laundresses held more status or less than housemaids. On one hand, they were essential. On the other, their work was associated with dirt. And in Victorian society, cleanliness was next to moral purity. Doing laundry gave you control over your family's image. Outsourcing it meant trusting your honor to someone else's rinse water. And let's not forget the class divide. Upper-class women supervised, rarely touched a washboard. Middle-class women sometimes helped, often did it themselves, especially if they were status conscious. Working-class women, they lived in soap and steam, and their laundry days were often every day. Today, you've been all three. By sundown, the house smells like hot linen, ash, and starch. Your hands are pruned, your muscles sore, and your hair frizzed from the steam. But your drawers are clean, your towels are folded, your corset covers are stiff with care, and your soul slightly more cleansed than before. Just don't ask when your next laundry day is. You'd rather not know. You stare down at it like it's plotting something, and honestly, it probably is. The corset, bone stiff, sweat slicked, beautifully embroidered, and entirely impossible to clean properly. You'd think, after everything you went through on laundry day, you'd be relieved to see one item that doesn't go in the wash tub. But no, the corset is the ultimate paradox in Victorian hygiene. Worn daily, laced tight against bare skin, absorbing every bead of perspiration, and yet it's never supposed to get wet. Well, not unless you want it to warp, unravel, or shrink to the size of a child's mitten. So, you do what Victorian women did. You improvise, you get clever, you get slightly desperate. You hang the corset out on the line to air between wears, not wash, air. As in, pray that a stiff breeze and some direct sunlight will be enough to make it socially acceptable again. It's the equivalent of Febreze and denial. And if it still smells a little lived in, well, that's when you reach for the lavender water, or maybe rose water, or a small bottle of eau de cologne. Anything alcohol-based and vaguely pleasant. You dab it along the inside of the corset like perfume. Not on the outside. No, that risks staining the silk or cotton. Just on the inner seams, where your ribs and sweat glands made intimate acquaintance the day before. That's the trick, isn't it? Keeping up appearances. Corsets are meant to shape the outside of you. No one's supposed to know what's going on inside, which is deeply Victorian when you think about it. And while we're thinking, let's break down what's actually in this elaborate undergarment you wear day in, day out, regardless of the season. Most corsets are made of strong cotton or satin and reinforced with whalebone, steel, or cording. The goal? Not comfort. Oh no. The goal is structure, lifting the bust, narrowing the waist, improving posture, and providing the perfect canvas for layers upon layers of fashion, which is just delightful when the mercury's pushing 30 degrees and your chemise is already sticking to your back. Remember, you don't wear your corset against bare skin. That would be savage. You wear a chemise beneath it, an extra layer to protect the corset from your body, not the other way around. In fact, the entire undergarment hierarchy is designed to preserve the cleanliness of the corset. Your chemise catches sweat. Your corset cover adds another buffer. The corset, it is to remain a pristine, untouchable icon. But let's be real. Pristine? Please. You've danced in this corset. You've bent over laundry tubs in this corset. You've walked through city streets and dusty country lanes and, let's be honest, sweated through 2 layers of linen in this corset. It's holding secrets. So, what do? Well, some women gently sponge the inside with diluted vinegar. Others swear by brushing it with alcohol and lavender oil. Some line the inside with removable muslin bands. Tiny, discreet strips you can change out like underarm pads. Kind of a proto-deodorant. And some just don't bother. They wear the same corset for weeks and hope no one notices. Let's talk quantity for a second. You might have 2 corsets in rotation. 3 if you're fancy. 1 for day wear, 1 for evening dresses, and maybe a sturdier one for work or riding. But corsets aren't cheap. They're tailored, boned, and stitched with care. You don't treat them lightly, which means every bit of cleaning is cautious, deliberate, and halfway superstitious. Now, let's entertain a historical oddity. Corset liners. Yes, they existed. Think of them like a slip or extra chemise, worn inside the corset to absorb sweat and body oils, but they're not common. And you're not guaranteed one unless you have means or happen to live in a particularly progressive corner of society. And what about laundering the corset itself? Surely someone tried. They did, but the results varied wildly. Some corset owners carefully unpicked the boning, washed the outer fabric by hand, and then reassembled it like a fragile Victorian puzzle. It could take days. Others risked spot cleaning only, never soaking, just dabbing. A few just gave up and bought a new one, if they could afford it. You, of course, are a realist. You do what most women did. Mask the evidence, limit the damage, and soldier on. Now let's circle back to the smell. Yes, that smell. You know the one. The faint musk of human persistence and wool fatigue. The mix of lavender, sweat, and day-old starch. You get used to it. Everyone does. It becomes part of the wallpaper of existence. Historians still argue whether Victorian society genuinely believed their bodies were inherently unclean, or whether the constant push for cleanliness was more about morality than hygiene. Some suggest corsets themselves were symbols of control of women's bodies, desires, and, yes, even their odors, even. Because think about it. A woman laced into a corset is a woman restrained, proper, contained. Her silhouette is sculpted. Her breath is shallow. Her movements are graceful, not because she's trying, but because she has no other choice. So, is it any surprise that the very garment meant to sculpt the ideal body was also immune to proper cleaning? That's not to say no one tried to modernize the process. By the late 19th century, some corset manufacturers offered washable models. These were made of unboned cotton, with simpler construction. But they were the exception, not the rule. And honestly, a washable corset was often a sign of lower class or utilitarian need. Not exactly fashionable. It's ironic, isn't it? The one garment most in contact with your body is also the one least touched by soap. But in a way, it fits. Because being a Victorian woman means perfecting the illusion of cleanliness. You keep your chemises spotless, your petticoats white, your face powdered, your breath freshened with parsley and cloves. But under it all, under the lace and the lavender, there's a garment you can't quite wash. So, you air it, you perfume it, you wear it with pride, and a little resignation. And when it finally gives out, when the seams fray and the bones snap, you fold it neatly, thank it for its service, and begin the slow, expensive search for its replacement. Until then, you keep spritzing lavender. You keep the windows open. You smile politely at the woman next to you in church, both of you knowing full well that your corsets are absolutely revolting. But saying so, well, that would be improper. You've managed to keep your corset respectable, your chemise reasonably white, and your face, well, presentable. But now you're standing in front of a mirror, dim, slightly warped, and not doing you any favors. And it's time to address the next frontier of cleanliness, your skin. Let's be honest here. Your face has been through it. Between coal fires, candle smoke, city grime, and tightly laced clothing that doesn't let your pores breathe, your skin is more battlefield than canvas. You're not chasing a healthy glow. You're chasing the aesthetic of never having had pores in the first place. Pale, smooth, matte. The kind of complexion that suggests you've never been outdoors or had a strong emotion. So, what do you reach for first? Cold cream. It's the Swiss Army knife of Victorian skincare. Cleanser, moisturizer, makeup remover, perfume base, you name it. And the star ingredient? Animal fat. Specifically, whale fat or beef tallow, carefully blended with rosewater, beeswax, and a bit of almond oil if you're lucky. You smear it on with your fingers. It feels thick, slightly grainy, like spreading chilled butter on your face. And it smells honest. Not bad, just very real. The rosewater tries its best, but the undertone of lard is hard to ignore. Still, it does the job. You wipe it away with a soft cloth, and there, beneath the creamy residue, is your natural Victorian skin. Pale, flushed from the cold water rinse, and very much still in need of help. Which brings us to the next product in your vanity arsenal. Face powder. Not the translucent featherlight dusting you might be thinking of. No, this stuff has presence. It's heavy, opaque, and possibly toxic. Many powders were made with rice starch or zinc oxide, which sounds fairly tame, until you realize others used white lead, actual lead, on your skin, repeatedly. Historians still argue whether Victorian women knew just how dangerous these lead-laced concoctions were. Some claim women believed it was safe in small amounts. Others suggest they simply didn't care. Beauty trumped health. And a few say that cosmetic manufacturers did know, but marketed the products anyway. Because who's going to stop them? Certainly not a society that values appearances above all. So you pat the powder on layer by layer until your skin tone is even, ghostly, and free of shine. Your freckles vanish. Your flush disappears. You look delicate, untouchable, like a woman who's never worked a day in her life, which is exactly the point. But powder's just the beginning. Let's talk about rouge, not blush. Rouge, a dab of color on the cheeks, applied very sparingly, because too much hints at impropriety, and you wouldn't want to be mistaken for that kind of woman. But a little bit, just enough to look healthful, acceptable. Often made from crushed carmine beetles or red ochre mixed with grease. It's vibrant, slightly sticky, and totally at odds with the ghost face aesthetic. But hey, contradictions are part of the charm. Now your lips. You could tint them, but only if you're daring. A bit of tinted salve, perhaps. Something with alkanet root or red wine residue. Just enough to suggest that your lips are naturally that color. Anything more would be scandalous. And your eyebrows? You darken them gently with burnt matchsticks. Mascara isn't a thing yet, not really. Maybe you use a bit of soot mixed with wax, applied with a tiny brush. Or maybe you skip it entirely. A truly clean woman doesn't need enhancements after all. She just needs to be born lucky. But here's the kicker. All this effort, the creams, the powders, the rouge, isn't necessarily cleaning your skin. It's decorating it, preserving it, camouflaging it. Which means you're often layering product over product day after day with only a rudimentary wipe down between. That cold cream? It's working overtime. Now let's get weirder. Because Victorians didn't just dabble in dangerous powders. Oh no. They went full mad scientist when it came to skincare treatments. Want to remove freckles? There's a lotion for that. It probably contains mercury. Want to bleach your skin a few shades lighter? Try ammonia. Suffering from acne? Rub your face with urine. Yes, actual urine. Preferably first thing in the morning. Some beauty manuals swore by it. Quirky enough for you? How about this? Women sometimes applied slices of raw meat to their faces at night, hoping the collagen would soak in and rejuvenate their skin. The result? Smelly pillows, questionable results, and an uneasy resemblance to tonight's dinner. And if that fails, there's always arsenic wafers. Yes, arsenic. Tiny pills. Advertised as beauty aids. Promise to whiten the skin, clear the complexion, and give the eyes a luminous quality. Were they poisonous? Absolutely. Were they popular? You bet. Some women also used belladonna drops in their eyes to dilate the pupils, creating a doe-eyed effect. Side effects included blindness, but hey, beauty is pain. All of this in pursuit of a look that screams innocence and fragility. The irony is thick enough to spread on toast, because the truth is, your skin is desperate for a proper cleanse, a good scrub, something to remove the buildup of soot, sweat, and powder, but the tools you have are limited. Soap, when used, is harsh, often alkaline. It strips your skin, leaves it tight and dry. So, you ration it. Instead, you rely on the cold cream wipe down, maybe a rinse with rose water, maybe a soft cloth dipped in milk or cucumber juice. You've read in Godey's Lady's book that a raw potato rubbed across the skin can reduce oiliness. You've tried it, didn't love it, moved on, and so the cycle continues. Morning, cold cream, powder, rouge, perfume. Evening, cold cream, cloth, maybe a lemon juice rub if you're feeling luxurious. And if you have a blemish, cover it. Never admit to it. Certainly don't touch it. Picking is unbecoming. But behind the vanity table and the creams and the faint smell of whale fat, there's a deeper pressure. Your face isn't just your face. It's your calling card, your resume, your moral compass. Society will judge your character by your complexion. A woman with oily skin is lazy. A woman with blemishes is impure. A woman who sweats is practically unhinged. So you do what you must. You rub the lard-based cream over your jawline, avoiding the heat rash behind your ears. You pat powder over your temples where yesterday's batch is still clinging for dear life. You smooth your brows, smile softly at your reflection, and tell yourself you look fine. Not fresh, not dewy, but fine. Acceptable, presentable, Victorian. Tomorrow, you'll repeat it all. And maybe, just maybe, you'll try that mashed strawberry mask you read about, or the almond paste scrub, or, heaven help you, the raw egg facial. But not the meat thing. You're not that desperate. Yet. Your face is powdered, your corset is in place, and your hair is tucked just so beneath your bonnet. You're as presentable as Victorian society expects you to be. But let's not pretend you're fully done. There's another realm of hygiene quietly gnawing at your dignity, your mouth. It's the part of you that must smile graciously at guests, sip tea with restraint, and never, under any circumstances, emit a whiff of anything unpleasant. And yet, oral hygiene in the Victorian era is an awkward little paradox. It's considered both vitally important and curiously optional. You start your day, if you're lucky and relatively well off, with a small porcelain cup of water and a stubby toothbrush. It's not plastic, of course. The handle might be ivory or bone, and the bristles, boar hair, stiff and patchy. It's the kind of brush that has opinions, mostly painful ones. You dampen it, grimace slightly, and dip it into your tooth powder. Tooth powder, not toothpaste. Toothpaste won't become widespread until the early 20th century, so you're dealing with a dry concoction made in your own kitchen or bought from the local apothecary. The ingredients: baking soda, salt, crushed charcoal, powdered chalk, and if you're lucky, a hint of mint oil. If you're unlucky, it's burnt breadcrumbs and crushed bone. You apply it, scrub vigorously, and immediately feel a grainy assault on your enamel. The taste is briny and bitter, like you've licked the inside of a fireplace, but your teeth, they shine. Sort of. Under the grime and years of tea stains, they show some defiance. You spit the mixture out, rinse with water if it's available, or, failing that, a swish of vinegar. That one wakes you up fast. Mainstream historians agree Victorian oral care was wildly inconsistent. Some people brushed every morning, some every week, some never. It depended on your class, your habits, and whether anyone told you that rotting teeth might be linked to your 4-cup-a-day sugar habit. And you do love your sugar. Sugar is woven into your diet, in your tea, your desserts, even your tonics. You consume it gleefully and frequently, and it slowly eats away at your molars while society ignores the link. It won't be until the germ theory of disease and further dental study that this sticky relationship becomes widely known. Until then, you're on your own. Now, you might be wondering, what happens if a tooth does go bad? Well, you have two options: live with it, or have it yanked out by someone with more confidence than training. Dentists, if they exist in your town, operate more like glorified blacksmiths than medical professionals. Anesthesia is experimental at best. A numbing whiskey shot is the most you can hope for. You sit in a chair, grip the arms, and pray. Extractions are fast, brutal, and final. No fillings, no crowns, no braces. If a tooth fails, it's gone. If you're wealthy enough and brave enough, you might invest in false teeth. And here's where things get weird. Victorian dentures were sometimes made from real human teeth, often from corpses. There was a time after the Battle of Waterloo when battlefield scavengers pulled teeth from dead soldiers to sell to dentists. They were called Waterloo teeth, and yes, they were exactly what they sound like. Later, ivory teeth became more popular, carved from hippopotamus or walrus tusks. Sounds elegant until you realize they yellowed quickly and smelled awful. And they weren't exactly easy to wear. Imagine clenching your jaw around a set of carved bones and trying to hold a conversation. Victorian elegance, ladies and gentlemen. But let's rewind from the grave robbing and go back to the everyday. Bad breath. It's a constant enemy. Between the tooth powder, the questionable dental care, and the rich, often meat-heavy Victorian diet, your breath needs all the help it can get. Chewing gum hasn't made its debut yet. Breath mints exist in crude form, little sugar pastilles infused with herbs. You might chew on parsley or cloves or rinse your mouth with vinegar water. Some women keep a small tin of cinnamon bark in their reticules and chew it discreetly between social calls. Still, there's no guarantee. If someone steps too close and winces, you'll know. And then there's the social code. You can't talk openly about your teeth. Dental discussions are seen as vulgar. Oral hygiene is a private matter, best handled quietly. If your breath offends someone, they won't tell you. They'll just make a mental note and maybe slowly stop inviting you for tea. That's the terrifying part. Clean teeth aren't just about health, they're about status. The upper classes are expected to have healthy smiles. Poorer people? Well, if they have a few teeth left, that's good enough. But you're expected to do better. So, let's say you want to take oral hygiene a bit further. You invest in mouthwash, or at least what passes for it. A mixture of vinegar, alum, and perhaps a dash of peppermint oil. You gargle carefully. It stings. Your tongue goes slightly numb. Your eyes water. But hey, you feel cleaner. Alternatively, you might try one of the more avant-garde home remedies. Some women swear by brushing with honey and burnt salt. Others use powdered eggshells. One fringe pamphlet recommends rubbing your gums with raw onions to stimulate blood flow. Another suggests gunpowder and rum. You try not to think too hard about that one. Historians still argue whether Victorian women viewed oral health as essential hygiene or optional vanity. Was it a genuine health practice? Or just another layer of social performance like corsets and face powder? Probably both. Because if there's one thing Victorian life excels at, it's blurring the line between necessity and performance. You don't brush your teeth because of dental science. You brush them because good breeding requires it. Because your smile must be ready for the parlor, the promenade, and the dance floor, even if it hurts. And it does hurt. A lot. Bleeding gums? Normal? Wobbly molars? Ignore them. Sharp nerve pain in the back of your jaw? Take a laudanum pill and carry on. Dentistry is still stuck somewhere between barbering and butchery. But if you can fake a smile, you're winning. Of course, none of this stops you from drinking tea constantly. Strong, dark, staining tea. It clings to your enamel and settles into crevices with enthusiasm. You sip delicately from your porcelain cup, savoring the warmth, knowing full well that another round of gritty powder and boar hair brushing awaits tomorrow morning. But for now, you set the cup down. You check your breath with a discreet sniff of your hand. Not terrible, not perfect, passable. You chew a clove. You press your lips into a polite smile. You say, "Would you like another biscuit?" and silently pray no one leans in too close. You're reclining in your fainting chair, lacing up your ankle boots with practiced elegance when it hits you. The one detail Victorian etiquette never ever prepares you for. Body hair. Yes, you've powdered your face, dabbed on rose water behind your ears, and even brushed your teeth with burnt breadcrumbs and a prayer. But now, as your stocking slips slightly or your sleeve rides up just a little too high, you realize some fuzz must be managed. But how? This is Victorian England, not a 21st century beauty aisle. You don't have razors with triple blades or creams that promise to dissolve hair painlessly in minutes. You have stones, you have tweezers, and you have a social code that tells you quite firmly to pretend hair doesn't exist in the first place. So let's start with the obvious. Your legs. Are you shaving them? Of course not. Victorian hemlines are long, your legs rarely see the sun, and unless you're a stage actress or in some deeply scandalous Parisian painting, no one's seeing your calves. Still, that doesn't mean hair is ignored. Wealthier women, those with time, mirrors, and vanity, might rub their legs with pumice stones, hoping to wear away the dark bristles slowly and painfully over time. Think of it as natural dermabrasion, but more medieval. You try it once. It leaves your skin raw and your mood worse. Some pamphlets recommend using sugar paste and strips of cloth, an early version of waxing. It's messy, sticky, and the results are patchy. You soldier on because to let hair grow unchecked? Scandalous. Not that anyone would say it to your face, but a smooth complexion is part of being clean. And hair? Hair is dirty, primitive, lower class. Then there are your arms. Soft fuzz is tolerated, barely. But if your arm hair is dark or coarse, you're in trouble. Victorian beauty books euphemistically describe unwanted hair as unsightly growth or blemishes upon womanly delicacy. You read this while sipping your tea and begin wondering whether Victorian publishers ever met a real woman. Facial hair, though, that's where things get serious. You peer into your tiny silver hand mirror, tilting your chin toward the sunlight. There it is, a shadow on your upper lip. It wasn't there last year, you swear, and now it haunts you. Your options are limited. Some women pluck facial hairs one by one with tiny tweezers. It's tedious and painful. Others bleach them using lemon juice or hydrogen peroxide, a newfangled chemical that smells like a laboratory and fizzles ominously on your skin. If you're really determined, you might invest in a spring epilator, a new invention from France made of a metal coil that grabs and yanks hair out as you twist it. It looks deceptively innocent, like a toy, but it bites hard. And here's the thing. All of this is done in secret. You never, ever talk about it. Not with your mother, not with your maid, not even with your closest friend. Victorian society thrives on the illusion of natural beauty, and natural must look like porcelain. No pores, no blemishes, no fuzz. You are expected to look effortless. You are expected to suffer in silence. Historians still argue whether most Victorian women truly removed body hair regularly, or whether this was a burden primarily placed on wealthier women who had the time, tools, and mirrors to notice such things. Rural women, after all, were often too busy with livestock and laundry to fret over chin hair, but city girls, debutantes, ladies of leisure, oh, they noticed. Let's not forget the eyebrows. Thick brows are out. The ideal Victorian brow is soft, slim, and high above the eye. You tweeze them into shape, carefully. Some women even shave them off and pencil them back in with burnt matchsticks or powdered charcoal. Risky, since one sweat session or unexpected rainstorm might wipe your entire expression off your face. As for the underarms, well, those are mostly hidden. Sleeves are long, arm raising is discouraged, and deodorant is hit or miss. But hair still lurks. Some beauty guides quietly recommend cutting it short with embroidery scissors. Others advise burning it off with a candle flame. Yes, you read that right. You are meant to light a candle, hold your arm taut, and cautiously singe the hair off without scorching your skin or setting your chemise on fire. It's a high-risk, low-reward endeavor. You attempt it once, never again. And yet, some women go further still, particularly those in the theater world or fringe social circles. They experiment with chemical depilatories, which are essentially early hair removal creams made with lime, arsenic, and other cheerful substances. They promise silky skin. They also cause burns, scarring, and alarming rashes. Still, beauty has always been a battlefield. For some, the solution is covering rather than removing. Gloves hide arm hair. High collars hide neck fuzz. Stockings and layers upon layers of fabric protect you from both male gaze and the burden of hair removal. But in summer, or in a scandalous sleeveless gown at a masquerade ball, that fuzz becomes a scandal waiting to happen. And then there's the growing presence of advertisements in newspapers and ladies' journals. Small, discreet, always euphemistic. For the lady plagued by troublesome shadows, or restore your youthful glow with our Turkish skin balm. These are early attempts at marketing depilation as self-care, and they feed your insecurities like a Victorian buffet. You consider buying one, mail order. You hesitate. What if someone sees the package? So you settle for your pumice stone again. You rub until your skin reddens, then dab it with cold rose water. You sigh. You hope no one looks too closely tonight. And then there's the ultimate irony. Your male relatives, they are encouraged to grow hair, beards, mustaches, sideburns thick enough to store winter nuts in. Their body hair is seen as virile, strong, noble. Yours, unclean, shameful, whispered about in hushed tones behind fans and parasols. You grit your teeth. You read one radical article that argues women's body hair is natural, that removing it is a product of oppressive social constructs. The author is, of course, dismissed as a hysteric, probably unmarried. You clip the article and hide it in your vanity drawer. Because here's the truth. Your hygiene is never just about being clean. It's about being acceptable, being admired, being invisible, yet perfect. So you shave, pluck, rub, and scrub, not for comfort, but for survival. Remember the fringe tip from earlier, the one about burning hair off? Well, here's a better one, threading. It's borrowed from Indian beauty practices and introduced quietly by a few cosmopolitan beauty experts in London. It involves twisting thread to pull hair out with precision. It's fast, surprisingly clean, and very secret. You try it once. It hurts, but it works. You almost smile. Because even if the world refuses to acknowledge your effort, your war against fuzz continues. One pluck, one stone, one singed patch at a time. And tomorrow, you'll do it all over again. It's the middle of the night. Rain taps gently against the panes of your cold window. A coal ember glows faintly in the hearth. All is silent, except your bladder. You stare into the dark, unmoving. Maybe the need will pass. It doesn't. And so begins the great and awkward ballet of the Victorian chamber pot. A routine as secretive as it is necessary. A moment every woman dreads but endures. Because indoor plumbing. That luxury is still a distant dream for most households in your era. You throw back the heavy covers, layers of wool, linen, and hand-stitched quilts, each one groaning under its own weight. The room is freezing. Your breath fogs slightly as you sit upright. There, under the bed, in its solemn porcelain glory, waits the chamber pot. You fumble for your slippers. The floor is like ice. You reach down with stiff fingers, dragging the pot out with a soft scrape that feels deafening in the stillness. It's beautifully painted, actually. Blue willow patterns or tiny roses. You wish you could appreciate the design, but you have other priorities right now. You adjust your nightgown, squat as gracefully as possible, and do what must be done. It's not romantic, it's not elegant, but it is survival. Now what? If you're lucky, you're a lady with a maid who will collect and clean your pot first thing in the morning. If you're not, you're doing it yourself. The pot must be emptied discreetly, usually into a slop pail. Or, if you're bold and the household is still sleeping, out into the backyard cesspit. God forbid you trip on the way. In boarding schools or shared homes, women often share one or two chamber pots between several beds, which means, yes, you're sometimes peeing in shifts. Good luck being the one who goes last. Some upper-class women had commodes, fancy furniture with hidden pots beneath cushioned lids. They look like chairs until you sit and realize it's a trap. Just another reminder that wealth doesn't always mean comfort. And don't even start on the smell. In polite society, the entire concept of excretion is glossed over with euphemism. You attend to nature. You retire for a moment. You refresh yourself. No one dares say potty. Not unless they're under 5 or scandalously French. Men, meanwhile, have their own version. The jerry or urinal pot, which they use standing up and often far more recklessly. Some even use the fireplace in emergencies. You suspect this is why so many drawing rooms smell faintly of betrayal. There is also the issue of accidents. You're wearing layers, petticoats, chemises, drawers, split at the crotch for this very reason. And all of it makes midnight toileting a strategic nightmare. One wrong move, and you've soaked your only clean nightgown. And laundry day isn't until Thursday. Now, imagine you're traveling. You're on a long train ride, corseted, crinolined, and parched from tepid tea. The train does not stop for hours. There are no toilets. There is, however, a ladies' compartment, a private-ish coach with curtains and, if you're lucky, a small chamber pot tucked into a bench. You're expected to use it with other women present, politely turning away or humming softly as someone relieves herself inches away. You never look anyone in the eye afterward. Historians still argue whether chamber pots were routinely cleaned with vinegar or lye soap, or whether some household simply emptied them and hoped for the best. You suspect both happened, depending on class, region, and how desperate everyone was that week. What's undeniable is this: the chamber pot was a fact of life, from queen to scullery maid. Oh, and let's talk about smell management, because this isn't a one-and-done operation. That pot's been used all night. By morning, the air in your bedroom is layered. So, you sprinkle dried lavender, bay leaves, or even burnt coffee grounds over the surface to mask the scent. Some households keep a small dish of lime powder nearby. It helps. Barely. Still, it's better than the alternative, Venturing outside at night, especially in winter, is a last resort. The backyard privy, a wooden shack with a hole, maybe a bench, and more spiders than friends, is icy, pitch dark, and profoundly haunted by bad decisions. Your candle won't last in the wind, and heaven forbid you step into something unspeakable. You went once. You still have nightmares. Of course, there are daytime rituals too. In the morning, after your quiet midnight pot performance, your maid will likely bring a jug of fresh water and empty the pot as discreetly as possible. If you're a maid yourself, well, you get to haul everyone's pots down to the scullery and scrub them with boiling water and a stiff brush, possibly while being judged by the cat. Now, let's visit a middle-class parlor where appearances are everything. The chamber pot is still there, just hidden. Maybe it's tucked inside a decorative cabinet or cleverly stored beneath a chaise lounge with a hinged cushion. Guests are never to see it. It's the Victorian equivalent of hiding your messy kitchen when company arrives. And if you're pregnant or unwell and you can't make it to the pot at all, that's where the bedpan comes in. A shallow, uncomfortable porcelain dish slid under your hips by a nurse or servant. It is humiliating, it is cold, and it sloshes when moved. You try not to think about it. One fringe curiosity, the bourdelou, a dainty, oval-shaped pot designed specifically for use during long church services. Named after a French preacher whose sermons dragged on so long, ladies supposedly had to relieve themselves discreetly in the pews. Whether they actually did or simply fantasized about it, historians still debate. You imagine trying to use one without anyone noticing and instantly understand why fainting was so popular. There were also portable urinals for women, small flask-like devices called ladies' conveniences that one could, in theory, use under a voluminous skirt. You shudder at the idea. One wrong move and your entire ensemble is ruined. Victorian fashion is not designed for stealth urination. Let's not forget, plumbing is coming. Slowly, in grand houses you might glimpse a water closet, a separate room with an early flush toilet. The mechanisms are loud, the plumbing unreliable, and the water often freezes in winter, but still, it's progress. Queen Victoria herself had one installed at Osborne House. But for now, in your own modest bedroom, you are stuck with porcelain and poise. You sigh, slide the pot back beneath the bed, and pull the covers up to your chin. Maybe next century will be kinder. And as you drift off, you remember the real indignity. Your younger brother has a chamber pot shaped like a frog, and he thinks it's hilarious. You hope he steps in it tomorrow morning. The rooster crows somewhere in the distance, but you're already up, rinsing your hands in a cold basin, brushing the sleep from your eyes. Today is laundry day, or baking day, or mending day. Honestly, it's always some kind of day. And depending on where you live, your approach to cleanliness varies more than a little. Let's talk about geography, shall we? Because being a country girl in the Victorian era means a very different hygiene routine than that of a city lady. You might both wear corsets and petticoats, but what you do to clean your body or avoid cleaning it is shaped by everything from running water, or lack thereof, to the dirt beneath your boots. In the countryside, water is plentiful, sort of. You may not have plumbing, but you've got wells, streams, and rain barrels. You gather water in the morning, sometimes walking a quarter mile with heavy sloshing buckets. It's laborious, but it means you can at least splash your face, rinse your arms, and scrub your feet without too much worry. In summer, you may even bathe in the river. Yes, in your underthings. No, it's not private. And that water, it's not always clean. Your cows drink from it. Your brothers fish in it. Sometimes it runs a little green, but it's water. And in a pinch, that's good enough. Soap, out in the country, is often homemade. You render animal fat with lye boiled from ashes. The resulting cake is harsh, brown, and smells faintly of last winter's stew. But it'll get dirt off your hands and scrub a floor. So it's doing its job. You're not worried about pH balance or skin softness. You're worried about finishing before sunset. Your bath, if it happens, is in a tin tub by the hearth. You pour kettle after kettle of hot water into it, trying not to burn your toes. Everyone uses the same bath water, by the way. First Dad, then Mom, then kids in order of age. By the time it's your turn, it's lukewarm soup with floating lint. You make do. Now, step into the city. Here, a middle-class woman might not have to carry water, but she doesn't always get clean either. Yes, she might live in a nice row house with polished door handles and oil lamps. But behind the facade, the cistern in the backyard supplies water to the scullery sink, and if you're lucky, there's a small indoor washroom with a stone basin. Water comes at odd hours, sometimes only when the public pump is flowing. You learn to fill buckets while you can, and because fire is dangerous in the city, long baths are rare. Instead, you spot clean face, neck, armpits, hands, maybe feet. Anything that will show or smell. It's strategic hygiene. And if you're wealthy, a townhouse with servants, your maid brings hot water to your room each morning, pours it into your porcelain basin, and lays out a fresh towel. You might have a proper bath once a week in a deep wooden tub lined with linen. It's decadent. Still freezing by the time you get in, but decadent. But in the city slums, it's a different world. Overcrowded tenements house 10 people to a room. There is no running water inside. You use a communal spigot in the alleyway if it hasn't frozen or been vandalized. You wash your body in piecemeal, sponging your face from a tin cup, scraping grime from your feet with a dull blade, using yesterday's dishwater to rinse your hair. Children often go barefoot. Their clothes are rarely washed. Diapers, reused cloth soaked in boiling water when possible. Families may share a single rag for drying. In working-class boarding houses, you might pay a penny to use a public bathhouse, but those come with conditions. You bring your own towel. You might wait in line. You may or may not have privacy. You almost definitely leave with something you didn't arrive with. Lice, perhaps, or an opinion about someone else's foot hygiene. In both town and country, class separates not just what you clean, but how you feel about being clean. Upper-class ladies prize fragrance and powder. Their definition of washed might be closer to well-scented. Working women value a scrubbed face and neat hair, proof that they haven't given up. And the difference shows. When a city girl visits the country, she wrinkles her nose at the smell of manure and wood smoke. She complains about shared bath water and hard towels. Meanwhile, the country girl marvels at indoor sinks and fancy soaps that smell like violets. She wonders how anyone gets anything done when they're constantly worried about appearances. Then there's the outdoor element. A country girl's skin is tanned, her nails often cracked. She scrubs them nightly with lye soap and grit. She doesn't worry about mud. It's just part of life. Her hair is likely braided to keep it from the wind. Fleas? Yes, occasionally. Lice? Sometimes. But she knows how to boil a comb and sprinkle her bedding with pennyroyal. A city lady, by contrast, is paler, more protected. Her boots rarely touch soil. She might wear gloves year-round, not just for warmth, but to keep her hands white. Her hair is pinned and perfumed, though often covered with a bonnet of veil. She may wear powdered rice on her skin to appear even fairer, though whether that counts as clean is up for debate. Historians still argue whether rural girls were objectively cleaner due to their access to natural water sources, or whether city girls' structured routines gave them the edge. The truth is, hygiene was rarely about how much you washed. It was about what you could access and what your society expected from you. Let's not forget superstition. In the countryside, your aunt might warn against too much bathing. It washes away your strength, she says. You nod politely and continue scrubbing your feet. In the city, doctors publish papers urging moderation. Overwashing could damage a woman's nerves, they claim. You find it interesting that only women's nerves are apparently at risk. Both worlds share one constant. Privacy is rare. You share rooms, towels, even underwear. Modesty exists, but only as much as logistics allow. A younger sibling may be in the room while you undress. A cousin may borrow your soap. You learn to perform your routines with quiet grace and zero shame. Quirky tidbit of the day: in some farming communities, girls bathe in milk. Yes, actual milk. When the cow's production spoils or there's excess sour cream, it's thinned with water and used for softening the skin. It smells awful, but leaves you surprisingly smooth. You imagine it's what Cleopatra might do if she were stuck in Cornwall with 3 cows and a churn. So, where does that leave you? Somewhere between the river and the wash basin. You do what you can. You scrub where it counts. You braid your hair before bed. And maybe, just maybe, you sneak a spritz of rose water to your underarms before heading out to market. Because whether you're a milk-bathing farm girl or a soap-dusting city belle, one truth remains. Cleanliness may be next to godliness. But in the Victorian world, it's usually just next to whatever you can manage before dinner. You wake up to the clatter of buckets, the squeal of the pump handle, and a broom handle banging against the floorboards. No, you're not a lady today. You're the servant, the one who brings the hot water, hauls the coal, and scrubs the chamber pots before breakfast. And before you can even think about washing yourself, you have a long list of bodies and basins to tend to. Welcome to the life of a Victorian maid. You're probably young, maybe 16, maybe 12, if you lied about your age to get hired. You sleep in the attic, in a narrow bed, under a scratchy blanket. There's no fireplace up here, and your breath fogs in the morning chill. You keep your boots by the stove downstairs at night, just so they'll be a little warm when you lace them up. And today, like every day, you're the first one up. Before the master or mistress stirs, you light the kitchen fire and start boiling water. 1 kettle for their tea, 1 for the washing stand in the master's dressing room. There are 5 bedrooms to service, 5 basins to fill, 5 towels to hang, 5 chances to spill water on a rug and get scolded for it. Let's be clear. Victorian servants clean others long before they clean themselves. Your nails are dirty from blacking boots. Your hands are red from scrubbing floors with lye and wire brushes. Your arms ache from lifting full pails. You smell, but there's no time to address that when there are table linens to iron and mutton to prepare. Maybe, if you're lucky, You wash your face with leftover basin water. You splash quickly while no one's looking. No soap. It's rationed and reserved for the lady's delicate rose-scented preferences. You dry with the hem of your apron. Baths? Let's not joke. You might get one once a month. In the scullery sink, after hours, when the house is quiet and the mistress is asleep. And even then, you're likely interrupted by someone who needs something polished, fetched, or boiled. But you try. You rub your armpits with a damp cloth when you can. You brush your hair each night, tying it back to keep it from the grease of the kitchen. If you're on your feet all day, and you are, you powder your boots with flour to keep them from rubbing raw. You cut the legs off old stockings to make bandages for your heels. You do your best, because even though no one expects you to be fragrant, no one wants a servant who reeks either. And when you have nothing, you still have vinegar. That's your secret weapon. Vinegar for rinsing your hair. Vinegar for wiping your underarms. Vinegar mixed with rosemary to freshen your underbodice. It stings, but it works. Kind of. Still, nothing changes the fact that cleanliness is a privilege you manage in 5-minute snatches behind the coal scuttle. And it's not just the maids. Think about the factory girls, the laundresses, the mill workers. These women sweat 12 hours a day in wool uniforms. They work next to open vats of dye, stacks of unwashed garments, greasy tools, and other people's body heat. There's no break room, no hand sanitizer, no time for self-care. Most bring their own rags to sit on at lunch, just to avoid soaking up factory grime. Some wear 2 corsets, one for work, one for walking home, so they can peel off the filth and feel remotely presentable. One fringe strategy? Stuffing cotton balls under the armpits to absorb sweat and tossing them at day's end. Not elegant, but effective. And then there are wet nurses who aren't just working with their bodies, but giving part of themselves away. They must appear clean and healthy even when they're sleep-deprived and underfed. Their employers inspect them, judge their diet, even critique their scent. Yet few are given the resources or privacy to properly bathe. Instead, they rinse with cloths, rely on herbs, and hope their natural scent doesn't offend. Meanwhile, ladies' maids, the higher-ranking servants, walk the strangest line of all. Their entire job is to maintain their mistress's beauty, yet they must look discreet and compose themselves. You might spend hours arranging someone else's curls while hiding your own beneath a bonnet. You might apply lemon juice to brighten her complexion, while your own face breaks out from kitchen grease. It's ironic. You're in charge of appearance, but invisible by design. Quirky side note, some maids wore stale bread in their shoes, crumbs tucked under the soles to absorb moisture and odor. It sounds ridiculous, but when your entire job depends on your ability to stand for hours and smell acceptable while doing it, you try anything. And speaking of odors, here's where things get interesting. See, servants weren't expected to smell like roses, but they also weren't allowed to smell like themselves. Too much scent, and you'd be scolded for being vulgar. Too little, and you'd be called slovenly. So most aimed for neutral, that magical middle ground of no discernible smell. How? You guessed it. More vinegar, more lavender sprigs tucked in apron pockets, more camphor rubbed on necklines, and above all, constant cleaning of everyone else's mess so that by extension you didn't end up soaked in it. Historians still argue Whether the poor hygiene of the working class was due to lack of resources or societal neglect. The answer is, of course, both. Clean water, soap, and privacy were hard to come by, but so was time, and energy, and a culture that considered your body worthy of care. Yet, despite all this, there's a strange kind of pride. A maid folds her mistress's chemise with hands scrubbed raw. She polishes boots so shiny you can see your reflection, even if her own shoes are scuffed and soaked. She may not have had a bath in a fortnight, but her linens are pressed. Her hair is plaited. She walks through the drawing room with her head high, if quietly, because dignity doesn't always look like a rose-scented soak in a porcelain tub. Sometimes it looks like a clean apron, a fresh ribbon in your braid, and the knowledge that even if you scrubbed someone else's floors all day, you still made time to rinse the soot off your own elbows before bed. And that's the real rub, isn't it? In Victorian England, cleanliness isn't just a routine. It's a performance. For the upper class, it's curated and scented and fluffed with powder. For the servant, it's invisible, strategic, and achieved in the gaps between bells and barked orders. But every woman, no matter how many stairs she climbs each day, has the same desire to feel clean, even just for 5 minutes. Even if it's just a splash of rainwater and a towel warmed over the stove. You peel off your apron. The kitchen is finally quiet. The embers are low. And with no one watching, you dip a cloth into warm water and close your eyes as you press it to your face. You breathe. The church bells toll on Sunday morning, cutting through the chill mist that hangs over the cobbled streets. You tug your shawl tighter, clutching a worn Bible under one arm, and head toward the parish chapel. This is the only morning you're allowed to slow down, just a little. And it's also one of the few days you hear a sermon that isn't about wages, food, or household tasks. It's about the soul. It's about cleanliness, but not just any cleanliness. You're told, loudly, firmly, and often, that cleanliness is next to godliness. And in the Victorian world, that belief is stitched into every sermon, every moral pamphlet, every line of parental advice. As a woman, your moral character is directly linked to how clean you appear, how neat your clothing is, and how quietly you smell of lavender instead of, well, anything else. That sounds sweet on paper, but let's be real. You live in a world where soap costs money, water is cold and shared, and you don't even have your own room half the time. Cleanliness might be godly, but achieving it often feels like penance. You sit in the pew, flanked by other stiff-bodiced women who also scrub their faces raw with carbolic soap just to be seen as virtuous. The preacher talks about purity of the body and soul, quoting psalms and weaving metaphors about white garments and unsoiled linens. Meanwhile, you know full well that a woman with clean fingernails and clean shoes is judged as good, and a woman with a streak of ash on her cheek or a torn hem is considered lazy, maybe even immoral. And here's the twist. Men aren't held to the same standard. They can have ink-stained fingers from the office, coal smudges from the rail yard, even the tang of sweat after a long ride. It makes them hard-working, strong, manly. You, on the other hand, one ink blot on your petticoat, and you're suddenly unclean. Emotionally, spiritually, socially, it's a trap, and you're very much inside it. There's even a popular home etiquette manual that suggests girls washed their faces twice a day and their hands before everything, before serving tea, before writing a letter, before entering a drawing room. But not just for health. No, no. It's because a clean girl is a respectable girl. And respectability is everything. Let's rewind for a second, though, and ask a bigger question. Did people actually believe that being clean made them better people? Or was it just a way to keep women in check? Historians still argue whether Victorian ideals about hygiene were sincere spiritual concerns or cleverly disguised tools of social control. There's truth in both. The rise of germ theory was just beginning, and people genuinely feared disease from dirt. But also, surprise, middle and upper class Victorians used these standards to distinguish themselves from the lower classes. Because if your skin glows from imported soap and your hair shines from frequent washings, it means you have time, servants, and money. And if you don't, well, you must be unworthy in more ways than one. One quirky tidbit? There was a brief trend, especially among the religious elite, where women were told to scrub their hearts clean by literally scrubbing their homes. The idea was that keeping your hearth spotless would polish your soul. So women beat rugs until their arms shook, mopped floors until they squeaked, and then whispered bedtime prayers asking for forgiveness for the dust they missed and the pride they dared to feel. Even fashion played its part in the morality of cleanliness. Pale muslin dresses, white gloves, spotless bonnets, all of them were fragile, impossible to keep clean without help, and coded symbols of piety and virtue. If you could stay spotless in a city full of horse manure and coal soot, it meant you were righteous, or at least rich enough to fake it. And don't get us started on the marriage market. Suitors were told to look for a clean and tidy wife, not just in terms of her stitching or her kitchen, but her person. Pale skin meant you weren't out working the fields. Smooth hands meant you didn't do laundry. A fresh scent meant you didn't sweat. And if you did, you had to work twice as hard to mask it with violet oil, rose water, or a sachet tucked between your corset and chemise. Which leads us to a very unspoken Victorian truth. The closer a woman looked to a porcelain doll, the more she was admired. No sweat, no smell, no stubble, no grit. But you're human, and despite your best efforts, you still end up with blistered feet, lint in your armpits, and a brow that needs blotting. And you're made to feel like that's somehow a moral failing. Now, imagine how this played out for women without means. A servant couldn't afford soap made from almond oil. A mill girl didn't own pale dresses, just a few work skirts and one Sunday frock. A laundress scrubbed other people's clothing for a living and still got side-eyed for her calloused hands. They were seen as less clean, which, by Victorian logic, meant less virtuous. And yet, these women probably did more scrubbing in a day than a duchess did in a month. In fact, one of the strangest contradictions of Victorian society is this. The people who worked the hardest to stay clean were often the most judged, and they knew it. You hear it whispered between pews, joked about in the laundry yard, murmured in the kitchen while peeling potatoes. Funny, isn't it? The more dirt you clean off, the more they think you've got inside. There's a reason so many moral reform groups targeted the working class with pamphlets and lectures about soap, water, and moral hygiene. They weren't just promoting physical health. They were trying to remake your soul, or at least make sure you knew your place. One particularly odd effort? The Clean Home, Clean Heart campaign run by charitable ladies who delivered soap to the poor, often wrapped in Bible verses. Sounds kind. Sort of. But those same ladies would inspect your hearth and sniff your children's clothing before deciding whether you deserved help. Yikes. But amid all this judgment, there's something beautifully stubborn in you. You bathe when you can. You clean your nails with the tip of a scissor. You iron your sleeves, rinse your face in cold water, and keep a sprig of mint tucked behind your ear on the worst days. Not because anyone told you to, but because you want to feel human. And maybe, just maybe, you suspect that godliness isn't about being spotless. Maybe it's about doing your best in a world that keeps moving the goalposts. So the next time someone looks at your boots and sniffs, you smile anyway. You know what you scrubbed and what you haven't. And you know which kind of dirt is on the outside and which kind isn't yours to carry. You stand at the threshold of change, holding a damp rag in one hand and a whole lot of confusion in the other. The year is somewhere in the mid to late Victorian era, and suddenly everyone has opinions about germs, not just dirt, not just bad smells, actual invisible world-ruining germs, and nobody knows what to believe. You're used to the old-school logic. Foul odors mean disease, so if you douse yourself in floral water and don't offend anyone's nose, you're probably safe. That's been the playbook for years. But now the newspapers mention strange terms like bacteria. Doctors argue about tiny creatures under microscopes, and Lady Whitley down the lane won't let her children use a public drinking fountain because it might be contaminated. Historians still argue whether the Victorians truly embraced germ theory or if they simply panicked and kept doing what they were doing, with slightly more vinegar. Here's what you know for sure. Science is crashing headlong into tradition, and you're stuck in the middle with a bar of gritty soap that smells like tar. The newer doctors, young, fresh from university, are telling people that germs cause disease. Cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis, all of it spread not by miasmas or bad air, but through dirty water, filthy hands, and contaminated linens. It's a radical idea, especially to those who've been clinging to their lavender sachets like spiritual armor. But the old guard, the ones who still wear top hats too tall for church and prescribe leeches for hysteria, they scoff. Overwashing is dangerous, they warn. It weakens the skin. It disturbs the balance of the body's natural defenses, which puts you, poor lady, in a deeply weird situation. You want to be clean. You don't want cholera. You also don't want to offend your elderly aunt who thinks daily washing will dissolve your morals and maybe your spleen. So you compromise like any sensible Victorian woman does. You wash your hands more, especially after touching chamber pots or street railings, but you still wear gloves in public to avoid unladylike contact. You might rinse your underthings a bit more often, but you still avoid full-body bathing more than once or twice a month. It's just safer that way. And then there's soap. Soap is suddenly booming. The Industrial Revolution isn't just building railroads and coal plants. It's cranking out bars of soap by the ton. Pears, Lifebuoy, Wright's Coal Tar. They're advertised in newspapers, on street signs, even inside your grocery orders. Each one promises to keep you clean, pure, safe. And most importantly, better than your neighbors. Yes, cleanliness is now competitive. You glance sideways at Mrs. Alberton across the lane. She just bought scented soap from a fancy London shop. her children smell faintly of honeysuckle, you consider spending your last 2 pennies on rose-scented glycerin soap instead of salt pork. Priorities, right? But here's the twist. Soap isn't always trusted. Because for many women, especially in rural areas, traditional methods still hold sway. You scrub with ashes and water. You wash your face with oat paste or sour milk. You rinse your hair in vinegar and egg. This whole new science of mass-manufactured soap, it feels a little suspicious, unnatural even. Some women whisper that the chemicals in factory soap can strip your essence, whatever that means. Others say they've seen skin rashes, brittle hair, or worse, an unnatural paleness that makes you look like a haunted doll. And don't even ask the older generation. Your grandmother still insists that a little dirt builds character, and that the only thing more dangerous than filth is over-cleaning like some nervous London girl who can't survive a muddy boot. Still, you can't help but notice how the new soaps lather so easily, how the scent lingers just a bit longer, how they make your skin feel just the tiniest bit smoother, if only for a day. But with soap comes scrutiny. You overhear conversations at the market. Did you hear? Mrs. Densby doesn't even use carbolic on her sheets. Scandalous. Or, I heard she washed her baby with just warm water, no soap at all. Gasp. Soap isn't just a tool. It's a test of class, of morality, of maternal worth. You don't just clean with it, you prove yourself with it. But it's not all bad news. This newfound obsession with hygiene is giving rise to something else entirely. Plumbing. Slowly, painstakingly, the wealthier homes are beginning to install indoor water closets and even bathrooms. Not go fetch the bucket from the yard bathrooms. Actual taps, sinks, ceramic tubs. You hear whispers of houses with hot water on demand, and you swoon a little. You, of course, still haul your water from a pump 3 houses down, but the dream is real, and dreams matter. In cities, public bathhouses begin popping up again. This time, less Roman decadence, more hygienic necessity. Charities even sponsor bath nights for poor women and children. Once a week, you get to step into a warm, tiled room and wash without freezing your kneecaps off. Bliss. Of course, there's still plenty of judgment involved. Some bath attendants will eye you up and down, deciding if you're fit to use the nicer stalls. Others inspect the soles of your feet afterward. Cleanliness, you realize, has become performative, yet still you return. Because somewhere between the grime of the tenement stairs and the chill of winter, you've realized that washing, even with suspicious soap and side-eyeing attendants, makes you feel more like yourself. You stand straighter after. Your skirts feel lighter. Your thoughts clearer. It's not about being better than others. It's about feeling like you have a bit of power in a world that rarely lets you control anything. And isn't that what all this is really about? Germs or no germs, old science or new. You just want to feel safe in your skin. Of course, this new hygiene movement doesn't stop with soap and plumbing. It worms its way into fashion, medicine, even furniture. Doilies are no longer just decorative. They're protective. They shield your chairs from sweaty necks. Hairbrushes get cleaned weekly. You hang lace curtains not just for beauty, but to filter air from the dusty street. Everything becomes a fight against invisible filth, and the language changes too. You don't just say someone's dirty anymore. You say they're unsanitary. It sounds fancier, but it cuts deeper. Unclean used to mean poor. Now it means irresponsible, negligent, dangerous, which is a whole new level of pressure, thanks. And through all of this, one idea persists. The cleaner you are, the safer you are, the more desirable, the more respected, the more loved. It's a heavy burden, but one that, ironically, you carry with grace. You scrub your hands a little more thoroughly. You hold your breath a little longer near coughing strangers. You nod when the doctor tells you to boil your baby's milk bottles, even if the neighbors think you're being fussy. Because maybe, just maybe, these new ideas will finally give you something other than judgment and discomfort. Maybe they'll give you relief, and maybe that bar of odd-smelling soap, the one wrapped in printed paper and promises, it's not a scam. Maybe it's your small act of rebellion, or your silent prayer, or just your ticket to one night's peaceful sleep. Whichever it is, you keep using it, even if the world still hasn't made up its mind. You know what's funny? You've spent your life trying to smell like nothing. No body odor, no sweat, no sourness. Just rose water, maybe a hint of lavender, and a whole lot of powder. And yet, smell is everything. It speaks before you do. It defines how you're seen, remembered, and ranked. In the Victorian world, your scent isn't just a private matter. It's a social currency, a weapon even. Take a step outside, and you'll see exactly what that means. You're strolling down a bustling cobblestone street, dodging the muck that drips from horses and ignoring the soup of soot, smoke, and questionable puddles soaking the hems of skirts around you. The air is thick with coal fires, rotting produce, sewage drains, and too many people packed into too little space. It's like breathing through a wool sock dipped in vinegar and despair. Yet somehow, amidst all this, someone nearby smells clean. Not fresh laundry clean, not soap bubble clean, no, expensively clean. That subtle floral blend that doesn't just say, I bathed today, but practically shouts, I have servants and I'm better than you. You know that scent. It's class. Cleanliness in Victorian society doesn't just signal health or decency, it screams wealth. Soap costs money, water costs labor, time to bathe costs both. If you have the luxury to scrub every inch of your body regularly, it means you're not the one boiling water over a coal stove or hauling buckets up narrow stairs. You might get a proper bath once a fortnight, if you're lucky, and nobody else uses all the hot water first. But her? That lady floating by in her pale muslin dress that somehow stays white in this filth? She probably has indoor plumbing, or at least a maid whose entire job is to fill her bathtub. Historians still debate just how widespread these elite hygiene habits were. Were they truly everyday rituals or carefully staged performances for guests and gossip? Either way, the illusion worked, and the illusion matters. Because by now, it's not enough to be clean. You must also appear clean, visibly, noticeably, fragrantly clean, which leads to some awkward consequences. You find yourself buying cheap perfumes just to mask the reality of your 3-day-old sweat. You powder your underarms and pat your bodice with lemon juice. You borrow your cousin's violet toilet water before going to tea, even though it gives you hives. Not to impress the men, mind you. Other women are the real audience. There's this unspoken sniff test that happens when you enter a room full of respectable ladies. A subtle lean in, a brief pause, and either a relaxed smile or a slightly raised eyebrow. One means you passed. The other means they'll be talking about you at church on Sunday. And if you don't pass, well, there's a growing movement, whispered between fans and behind gloves, that believes poor hygiene is more than just unfortunate. It's immoral. That if you stink, you must also be lazy or unfit or unclean in other more spiritual ways. It's a deeply unfair logic, but it's spreading like an unwashed petticoat in summer heat. So, you do what you can. You scrub the insides of your gloves with lavender water. You air out your corset daily, even if you can't wash it. You use vinegar foot soaks, saltwater mouth rinses, and sachets sewn into your bodice. You do all this not just to feel good, but to be good, or at least to seem good. But here's the kicker. Sometimes smelling too clean gets you in trouble. There's a rumor that overly perfumed women are either vain or fallen, that they're hiding something scandalous. Some men wrinkle their noses at strong floral scents, claiming they signal a woman of the stage. Some women whisper that too much musk means you've been entertaining visitors. So now, on top of everything else, you must master scent moderation. Too little, and you're uncouth. Too much, and you're suspicious. Welcome to Victorian womanhood, where even your natural musk is a minefield. Meanwhile, the scent divide between rich and poor grows wider. If you work in the mills or laundries or fish markets, no one expects you to smell of violets, but you're judged for it all the same. Charity visitors may hand you a bar of soap, not out of kindness, but as a kind of moral correction. Some employers start demanding proof of personal hygiene in letters of recommendation. That's right. Your smell affects your employment. And God forbid you ever show up to the doctor with body odor. Some of them believe that smell correlates with illness and will treat you differently, even if your symptoms have nothing to do with hygiene. Because in this era, diagnosis by scent is still a thing. Your body, your breath, your clothes, they speak louder than anything you say. And then there's the world of domestic service. If you're a maid, you're expected to clean others and stay immaculately clean yourself. Which is a cruel joke, really. You sweat all day scrubbing floors, lifting buckets, hauling chamber pots, and then get scolded if you're unkempt while serving tea. The irony, you might be the only person in the house who bathes weekly, because you clean the tubs too. But you learn tricks like tucking mint leaves under your cap to mask scalp oil, or sewing lemon peels into your apron pocket, or stealing a single drop of your mistress' rose oil to rub behind your ears. Every woman in your position does it, because scent is survival. Even for the upper crust, it's no less intense. Aristocratic women obsess over signature perfumes, often custom blended by Parisian apothecaries. Their rooms are lined with crystal bottles, ambergris, neroli, bergamot. They dab scent behind their knees, inside their gloves, even on handkerchiefs. They wave theatrically in social settings. Some even keep scented drawers, not metaphorically, but literally. Their linens are perfumed with cedar, their underthings dusted with violet powder, their scarves pressed with dried orange peel. Why? Because one whiff of someone else's musky collar can change everything. Marriages hinge on impressions. So do inheritances, proposals, and reputations. A woman who smells of sun and lavender is a catch. One who smells of damp wool and boiled onions, she's lucky if she gets a dance. And still, there are those trying to break the rules. The radicals, the suffragists, the quietly defiant. They sometimes reject fragrance on purpose. They claim it's a distraction, a chain, a false badge of purity. They lean into the scent of ink, books, and honest sweat. They wear wool, not silk. They walk instead of riding in carriages. And sometimes they let themselves smell like people, real people. It's bold and it's frowned upon, but it's also the future. Because slowly, Victorian society begins to realize that hygiene isn't just about class. It's about access, infrastructure, knowledge, fairness. Campaigns for public wash houses begin to frame cleanliness as a right, not just a luxury. Doctors start advocating for universal sanitation, not just elite purity. The conversation is changing, slowly, awkwardly, but changing nonetheless. And you're still caught in the middle. You're still tucking sachets into your drawers and patting your underarms with alum powder. Still worrying if your boots carry too much odor, if your breath is parsley fresh, if your skirts hold the memory of yesterday's coal smoke. But maybe, just maybe, you're starting to question it all. What if smelling clean doesn't make you good? What if being clean doesn't make you loved? What if you deserve dignity? Whether or not you can afford a rose-scented bar of soap, that question lingers as you undress for bed, sniffing the fabric of your nightgown to check for anything suspicious. You wrap your hair, brush your teeth with salt and mint, and tuck a dried clove under your pillow, and you sleep soft, cleanish, and just a little defiant. And just like that, you're back at the washstand, hands plunged into a basin filled with water that's already gone lukewarm. The soap, if you're lucky, still smells faintly of lavender. If not, well, you try not to think too hard about what it smells like. It's the last vestige of a ritual older than your mother and her mother before her. Because tonight, you're about to take part in something quietly revolutionary. The slow, creeping birth of modern cleanliness. You wouldn't call it a revolution, not yet. It's more like a whisper through alleyways and a shift in the factory air. But it's happening, and you're part of it whether you realize it or not. You squeeze out your cloth and begin to wipe your arms, one at a time. It's not a full bath. That would require time, help, and about 5 kettles worth of hot water. But this little sponge down, done daily or as close to it as you can manage, is part of a growing trend. You, dear listener, are participating in the great soap revolution. Let's rewind for a moment. For most of your life, soap has been a luxury. You've seen it in elegant slivers beside your mistress's vanity, tucked in embroidered boxes or imported from Paris. You've seen it made in backyards with animal fat and lye harsh and gritty enough to take off both dirt and skin. And sometimes you've gone without it entirely, scrubbing with vinegar, oatmeal, or just water and hope. But now, something is changing. Thanks to industrialization and the rise of mass production, soap is getting cheaper. Factories are cranking out bars faster than you can say carbolic acid. And for once, they don't all smell like the inside of a butcher's apron. Some even come with delicate wrappers, roses, citrus, violet. Not to mention the bold new branding, pears, soap, sunlight, life boy. products so shiny and new they almost feel like science fiction. Historians still argue whether the popularity of these soaps spread more from marketing or genuine hygiene reform. But the effect is real either way. You've seen it in your own home. There's that new poster above the grocer's counter promising that a clean home is a happy home. There's that soap advertisement with the cherubic baby, impossibly white, glowing with purity. There's the midwife who now insists on washing her hands before delivering babies, not just to be polite, but because of something called germs. Yes, germs. You've heard of them, whispered between nervous neighbors and forward-thinking doctors. Tiny, invisible creatures that live in filth and cause disease. It sounds suspiciously magical, like fairies made of muck. But it's also backed by new science, microscopes, and some very loud Frenchman with a curly mustache. It's still up for debate in many circles, though. Some doctors swear by boiling instruments, while others still don't wash their hands between patients. It's a tug of war between old habits and new ideas. And in your own heart, you feel the same tension. Because cleanliness, for you, has always been about appearances, about morality, about being presentable enough to keep your job or avoid church gossip. But now, it's about health, about protecting yourself, your children, your community, about not dying from something as simple as childbirth or a scrape on the knee. And so, little by little, your routines evolve. You wipe your baby's bottom with soap and warm water instead of just cloth. You hang your undergarments in the sun to dry. Sunlight kills germs, they say, and it smells better too. You boil your handkerchiefs. You open the windows, even in winter, to air out the sick room. It's exhausting, yes, but also empowering. Because suddenly, you have a say in your well-being. You're not just at the mercy of fate or fortune. You have tools, soap, boiling water, vinegar, and they give you control. Of course, the reformers arrive like a marching band with pamphlets. They build public wash houses, places where working-class women can scrub their clothes, bathe their children, and even themselves, for a small fee. They set up hygiene campaigns, teach factory girls how to wash their hands before eating, and distribute free bars of soap with every sermon. And it's not just the poor who are targeted. Even the aristocracy gets a shake-up. Plumbers are suddenly in demand. Bathrooms begin appearing in homes that once made do with a pitcher and bowl. Toilets become less of an oddity and more of a status symbol. And yes, the era of the full hot bath at home is on the horizon. You'll get there. Maybe not this year or even the next. But it's coming. Still, progress is never tidy. There's backlash. Some say too much bathing will make women hysterical or worse, infertile. Others argue that obsessing over hygiene leads to vanity, laziness, or weakened moral fiber. You even hear rumors that soap is unwomanly, a tool of industrial capitalism that disconnects people from tradition. But at the same time, others, particularly women, cling to it like salvation. Because at the end of a long day of work, chores, and the crushing weight of societal expectation, there's something sacred in being clean, in scrubbing away not just dirt, but judgment, in rinsing off the smoke and the sorrow. You don't just wash your skin, you reclaim it. So here you are, with your rough cloth, your cracked bar of carbolic soap, and a basin of tepid water. The candles flicker low. The streets outside have gone quiet, save for the occasional clatter of hooves or a shout from a night watchman. You're washing your feet, the soles still sore from a day in tight boots. You pause to soak them a moment longer, relishing the warmth. Then the neck, the wrists, the back of your ears. Soft little rituals that no one else will see, but which matter all the same. Because tomorrow you will rise again. Dress in 5 layers, lace your corset, and step out into a world that still hasn't decided what it wants from you. But you'll be clean. Maybe not perfectly perfumed, not aristocratically pampered, but you're kind of clean, strong, thoughtful, and just a little ahead of the curve. And that's something. So, as you fold your washcloth, pat your skin dry, and slide between crisp sheets, think of everything that's changed since those early days of vinegar dabs and chamber pots. You've lived through the mess of it, literally and metaphorically. And you've seen how something as small as a bar of soap can change a life, or at least how it changed yours. Now, everything slows. Your breath softens, your muscles ease, and the world fades to a gentle hush. The candle flickers lower, casting warm shadows across the walls of your quiet room. The smell of lavender, faint but soothing, still clings to your skin, mingling with the earthy softness of worn cotton and the faint mineral tang of the basin. Your body sinks deeper into the mattress, every part of you grateful to be still. That drafty window doesn't feel so biting now. The sounds from outside, hooves, murmurs, distant clatter, become rhythmic, predictable, safe, like the turning gears of time itself. And as you lie there, wrapped in that fragile sense of peace, you begin to realize you've done enough. You've faced the icy water, the endless layers, the judgment and the jokes. You've powdered and scrubbed and dabbed your way through a world that never made it easy. You adapted, survived, even softened the rough edges with your quiet rituals. And tonight, you rest. No one needs anything from you now. No one's watching. There are no petticoats to straighten or buttons to fasten. Just you, breathing, safe, clean. The story of Victorian hygiene is messy, strange, and full of contradictions. But it's also a story of resilience, of women like you, making do with vinegar and cold cream, crafting dignity out of soot and steam. Let the scent of rose water drift through your dreams now. Let the softness of cotton whisper against your skin. Let the warmth of sleep fold around you like bath water you didn't have to carry. You're safe, you're enough, and you're already drifting.